Chapter 880. Rong Huanxian couldn't help but be furious. A mere mortal dared to laugh at him? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You're really too inferior. Even my disciple doesn't take you seriously, so where did you get the courage to be arrogant?" Damn it! Rong Huanxian's figure flashed, and he charged towards Ding Ping. He wanted to suck this mortal's blood dry as punishment, and he wanted Ling Han to lose a disciple to enjoy the latter's pained expression. Hong in the sky, thunderclouds rolled. He broke through to the shattering void tier, and heaven and earth sensed it, sending down a heavenly tribulation. Ling Han mumbled and said, "I heard that outsiders can't interfere with heavenly tribulation, or else they'll be swept into it. However, I can even split open this world, so what's there to be afraid of if I'm swept into the heavenly tribulation? It's just the right time for me to temper my body of lightning." He laughed mischievously, and with a grab, Rong Huanxian fell into his hand without any suspense. He just entered the shattering void tier, so how could he rival him? What? Rong Huanxian's face was full of disbelief. He was only in the heaven tier before, so how could he sense how powerful Ling Han's strength was? In his mind, Ling Han only stepped into the shattering void tier a year or two earlier than him, and was at most in the second or third layer. How could the difference be so great? "Ling Han, I'm going to pass the heavenly tribulation. Do you want to accompany me?" He immediately laughed strangely. Who would pass the heavenly tribulation without losing a layer of skin? Although Ling Han was very strong, the stronger one was, the stronger the heavenly tribulation would be, and the possibility of dying wasn't low at all. "You're thinking too much." Ling Han only grabbed Rong Huanxian. With his strength, even 100 Rong Huanxian couldn't possibly escape. Quang! The heavenly tribulation formed, and a bolt of divine lightning struck towards Rong Huanxian, and Ling Han was swept in as well. Immediately, a second bolt of divine lightning struck down, targeting Ling Han. However, because the distance between the two was too close, the two bolts of divine lightning enveloped both of them. No! Rong Huanxian let out a loud cry of terror. Even if he underwent the tribulation in his strongest state, there was a 50-50 chance that he would be able to survive. But now, he was being restrained by Ling Han, and he had to go through the heavenly tribulation of two people. Was it even possible? Had Ling Han gone mad? He had actually put himself in danger just to kill him. Clang clang clang, the divine lightning continued to strike, and with Rong Huanxian's physique, how long could he last? In an instant he was struck into ashes. Before he breathed his last, Rong Huanxian's eyes were filled with resentment because when the divine lightning struck Ling Han's body, nothing happened at all, and they all bounced back. Motherfucker, he died with his eyes open, he died with his eyes open. In his next life, he would never let him meet a freak like Ling Han again. It was a tragedy to be born in the same era as him. Ling Han was neither happy nor sad. With his current strength, he naturally wouldn't take defeating the 1,000 Corpse sect to heart, but no matter what, he had still gotten rid of an unstable factor. He brandished his fists and shattered the remaining 2-3 lives corpse caskets. The pond of the underworld was naturally formed, and destroying it was useless. It was condensed from the yin qi of heaven and earth, so he could only seal off the pond of the underworld below Million Treasure City with a formation, but it was basically impossible for the 1,000 Corpse sect to rise from the ashes. Ling Han brought Ding Ping back to the Imperial City. On one hand, he announced to the world that Ding Ping was his disciple, and on the other hand, he summoned all the officials to carry out a final discussion. After splitting open the skies, he would definitely use himself as a hostage, so the Rain Emperor would become the regent, acting on behalf of the imperial court. However, this didn't affect much. Ling Han had always been a spiritual symbol, and had almost never managed the affairs of the imperial court. As long as he didn't die, it was fine. It really didn't matter if he was more or less. This made Ling Han very speechless. Being an emperor to this extent, was it a success or a failure? After splitting open the skies, some clans and forces would definitely become restless and collude with the forces of the immortal realm to disintegrate the Great Ling Empire from within and divide the land. Thus, a cleanup campaign would be carried out now, and those who weren't loyal would be directly stripped of all power. There was no need for Ling Han to deal with this. He made a trip to the Kong clan. It was very likely that the heaven-grade alchemist Kong Zisher was a descendant of his disciple Kong Xiu Yuan. But only after Ling Han asked did he find out that this Kong clan could only be considered as half a bloodline descendant of Kong Xiu Yuan. The ancestor of the Kong clan was Kong Xiu Yuan's adopted son. For some reason, he didn't go to the immortal realm with him, but he still managed to preserve a bloodline. Before he found his 4 disciples, Ling Han didn't plan to reveal his identity either, so he took his leave, causing the members of the Kong clan to feel uneasy. What did His Majesty mean by this? The current Ling Han's power was too great. In the past, heaven-grade alchemists still had a transcendent status, and didn't need to take anyone seriously, but now it was true that all lands under the heavens belonged to the emperor, and even heaven-grade alchemists had no choice but to lower their heads. The alchemist society no longer had a transcendent position, but had instead become a force directly under the control of the imperial court, further strengthening the consolidation of imperial power. Ling Han summoned the geniuses of the younger generation. After splitting open the skies, Ling Han hoped that they could all go out and wander the immortal realm, sharpening themselves, and when their skills were accomplished, they would return to serve the great Ling Empire. Of course, this was dangerous. In the immortal realm, none of their backgrounds would be of use, and the immortal realm was full of experts. Even Ling Han couldn't be considered anyone, and leaving the great Ling Empire would inevitably be in danger of dying at any moment. But only in this way could those who returned in the future become elites. Wen Yijian, Xinyuan Ziguang, and the others all sighed ruefully. Back then, Ling Han's strength was equal to theirs, even inferior to theirs, but now he had already become the most powerful and influential person in this world, while they were still only in the deity transformation tier. This made them have no choice but to admit that there were indeed some people in this world who were incomparably freakish, and they couldn't compare no matter what. Ling Han encouraged everyone. These youngsters could all be the future pillars of the great Ling Empire, and he had high hopes for them. But Ling Han didn't rely too much on them. For the great Ling Empire, it was more of a kind of responsibility. He believed more in his own strength, and only one's own strength was true strength. Ling Han obviously took care of Yu Kaiyu the most, supplying him with all kinds of cultivation resources without limit, and even passing on the few mystical powers he had mastered to the other. However, passing on mystical powers wasn't a simple matter. It required stripping the mark of the secret technique from the Sea of Consciousness, which was a kind of harm to the body, so Ling Han didn't have the idea of popularizing mystical powers, and only passed them on to his 3 brothers Feng Peyun, Rain Emperor, and Mu Rongqing. Taking advantage of this time, he did his best to make arrangements. Once splitting open the skies, there would be no chance. As his 5th disciple, Ding Ping naturally received focus training. In the future, after he left, Ding Ping would first follow the Rain Emperor and the others to cultivate, then leave the Great Ling Empire to train on his own. Another half a month later, Ling Han decided to split open the skies. He didn't invite the whole world, not because he wasn't confident enough, but because he was certain that he would succeed, and didn't need anyone to witness his greatness. Chapter 881. A good story. However, splitting open the skies was such a big thing, so how could it be kept a secret? Moreover, Ling Han didn't want to hide it either. He clearly told the world when to split open the skies, but he didn't send out an invitation like Ma Duo Bao, letting people watch the ceremony. Forces with sharp ears had already rushed over, and the sea race was no exception, wanting to witness this magnificent feat. However, after experiencing a failure, everyone didn't treat Ling Han very well. Back then, how powerful was Ma Duo Bao, the world's #1 killing formation? But wasn't he still killed by the elites of the divine realm? No matter how strong Ling Han was, how could he compare to Ma Duo Bao? At least, it wasn't something that could be done in a mere year. If Ling Han split open the skies 100 years later, he might still have a chance, but now everyone knew why. The time of the Divine Realm's 5-sex full-scale invasion was getting closer and closer. At that time, even with the realm's suppression, these elites would have a chance to explode with an immortal-level attack, and with their interference, splitting open the skies would be even more hopeless. It had to be done quickly. Everyone prayed in their hearts that Ling Han had to succeed, or else they would soon be refined into a realm pill, using their lives to increase the cultivation of the elites of the divine realm. Just thinking about it made them so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. If that day really came, Then they would rather commit suicide than let those in the divine realm take advantage of it. This was also one of the reasons why the five sects had been brainwashing for 10,000 years. They couldn't waste materials. Brat, are you really confident? Helian Tianyun asked solemnly. His current strength had already returned to its peak, and even surpassed it. His regular battle prowess had reached 21 stars of shattering void tier. Much stronger than Ma Duo Bao back then. Ling Han smiled and said, "Haven't you been beaten up enough by me?" Helian Tianyun couldn't help but feel depressed. He had fought with Ling Han before, and didn't use power of the nation's support on both hands, but he was completely defeated by Ling Han, almost beaten silly. Brat, you're definitely a freak. Not only is your physique tough, even your brute force is so terrifying. He rolled his eyes repeatedly. Now I'm wondering who is the true dragon's descendant. According to legend, the true dragon's power was the strongest, so the divine realm used the true dragon's extreme power as the standard to measure strength. He clearly did not have the bloodline of a true dragon, but his strength could surpass that of a pure-blooded descendant of a true dragon. This was simply inconceivable. Ling Han smiled. True dragons might not be the strongest in the immortal realm. Otherwise, the 9 dragons tyrant body art would be a joke. Also, even if Ding Ping did not cultivate the 9 dragons tyrant body art, his strength would still surpass martial artists of the same rank by tens of times. If a true dragon were to compete with him, would he be that strong in the same realm? Therefore, there should be existences in the immortal realm that were more powerful than the true dragon. That disciple of yours is also a freak. Helian Tianyun had obviously thought of this as well, and became even more depressed. Not only did we have one freak, but now we have a second one. However, you really still have a lot of room for improvement. Why don't you wait a little longer? Helian Tianyun tried to persuade him again. At least, Ling Han had not cultivated the power of rules yet. Ling Han shook his head. After splitting open the sky, the power of rules of the small world was not applicable in the immortal realm at all. It was a complete waste of time, so he decided to cultivate the power of rules after entering the immortal realm. After splitting open the sky, I'll leave Ding Ping to you. I'll also teach you the 9 dragons tyrant body art. If you can't teach that brat well, I'll definitely kill you in the future. Ling Han said with a smile. Speaking of the 9 dragons tyrant body art, Helian Tianyun immediately became excited and said, I really didn't expect there to be such a miraculous art in the world. Even now, I still can't believe that there is actually a power that surpasses the true dragon in the world. Haha, when I cultivate it to great success, I'll definitely conquer the entire immortal realm and make those guys from the 5 sects and the Ao clan kneel down and say that they've conquered. Let's not talk nonsense. Otherwise, people will say that I'm stalling for time. Ling Han waved his hand, gazed at the sky, and suddenly flew up. Today I split open the sky. He announced these words to the world through the totem. As soon as he finished speaking, it immediately caused the people of the world to shout. It was one thing to not invite the various major forces to attend the ceremony, but splitting open the sky was such a major event that Ling Han had naturally long since announced to the world that he was going to split open the sky today. With his appearance, the various major forces that had long been waiting in the vicinity of the imperial capital all became nervous. If Ling Han also failed in splitting open the sky, they would be forced to accept their fate. Taking advantage of the fact that the 5 sects of the immortal realm had yet to make a move, they would enjoy life to the fullest. At that time, those who should resign themselves to fate would resign themselves to fate, and those who should commit suicide would commit suicide. The only hope. Moreover, after experiencing a failure, especially when they were incomparably close to success, everyone's hearts had also become fragile. He had to succeed. Master. Ding Ping clenched his hands. He now also knew what splitting open the sky represented, and even more so knew what it would mean if Ling Han failed. It would be the end of all living things. He hated himself. Why was his strength so weak? He could only watch helplessly, and could not help in the slightest. Brat, work hard on your cultivation, and your future achievements will not be lower than your master's. Helian Tianyun said. This human made him feel afraid. His own strength was obviously not strong, yet he could explode out 100-fold. Even if he did not cultivate spiritual power, it was still shocking. Perhaps a freak like him did not need to cultivate origin power at all. That would only be a waste of time because origin power could not explode with 100-fold power through his special bone structure. Ding Ping nodded. He wanted to share Master's burden. He had heard that after entering the immortal realm, Master would be forced to be a hostage. For the monarch of a nation, what kind of humiliation was this? As a disciple, he felt as if he was experiencing it himself. He definitely had to become stronger, and be able to become Master's right-hand man, and not hide behind Master, letting Master bear the pressure alone. You must succeed, the Rain Emperor Feng Peyun Mu Rongqing Yu Kaiyu and the others all said with clenched fists. You must succeed, everyone shouted in their hearts, holding their breaths. Their emotions were tense, like a taut bowstring. The lower realm already had no way out. But Ling Han's heart was extremely calm. Unless the 5 sects of the immortal realm had an elite like the Rock Palace, he was not the slightest bit afraid with the level of that elite from last time. The problem was, the 5 sects were only forces of the Sun-Moon tier. So where would they find a stronger elite? His present battle prowess was much higher than Ma Duobao's, and his physique was on the level of godly metal. After the attack from the immortal realm was weakened by the realm power, he could completely take it head-on, and not even a hair on his head would be harmed. To him, splitting open the skies was only a formality. Shua he drew out the mountain and river axe. Long live, long live, long live! All the living beings in the world were shouting, and gathered through the totem, forming a vast ocean. Ling Han gripped the mountain and river axe, and a terrifying power began to circulate. Wang the mountain and river axe glowed, exuding endless might. He was too strong now. Brute force and origin power exploded together, and his power reached as high as 13 stars of shattering void tier. Added with the use of various martial arts techniques and secret techniques, his own battle prowess had already reached as high as 23 stars. He had not even used power of the nation, and this was already Ma Duobao's peak battle prowess. What was more frightening was that he still had room for improvement. Splitting open the skies was as easy as turning over his hand. Reading on one's phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 882. Shua he chopped out with his axe, and the space immediately shattered like crystals. Pa it shattered. The destructive power of this axe was too terrifying, directly splitting the void. On the other side, the heaven and earth of the immortal realm had already appeared. Wang the Eye of Heavenly Tao appeared. Its mission was to stop all those who destroyed the balance of heaven and earth. If it could think, it would definitely be extremely depressed. Twice beaten, twice split open the sky. Was this an unlucky year? Because Ling Han had already caused great damage, it naturally wouldn't wait any longer. It directly opened its giant eye and shot out a prismatic light towards Ling Han. Ling Han casually pushed it aside and said, "If you stop me again, I'll kill you. But if you submit, you can be the great Ling Empire's guardian, and I can protect you for thousands of years." Boom! What responded to Ling Han were multiple divine chains of rules trying to trap Ling Han. Humph, since you're so stubborn, then I can only slaughter you. Ling Han's gaze turned cold, and he struck out with his axe. Pa, a wound immediately appeared on the Eye of Heavenly Tao. From top to bottom it was 3 feet deep, and blood instantly gushed out wildly. A strong sense of sorrow instantly arose between heaven and earth, and everyone had the urge to cry out. Hua, the wound on the Eye of Heavenly Tao opened wide, and endless blood gushed out, surging towards Ling Han, wanting to drown him completely. Insignificant skill. Ling Han casually struck out with his axe, and the sea of blood was immediately split open by him. Like a blood-red satin, it streaked towards his left and right sides. His gaze was awe-inspiring, and he struck out with his axe again. Pa, the wound on the Eye of Heavenly Tao expanded slightly, almost splitting into 2 halves. Too strong. Below, everyone cried out in shock. Before, they only knew that Ling Han was very strong and freakishly talented, and killing Aojian a year ago was proof. But after all, not many people knew of Aojian's strength, and the most profound image of Ling Han was his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist. But now, everyone knew that Ling Han was incredibly strong. Ling Han, who Ma Duobao had spent a great deal of effort to cut down the Eye of Heavenly Tao, did it so easily, and seemed to have plenty of energy to spare. In the distance, the 7 kings all nodded. They had to admit that Ling Han had already surpassed their boss. It was no wonder that Ma Duobao valued Ling Han so much, even handing the heavy responsibility of splitting open the skies to Ling Han in the end. You must succeed to comfort Boss Soul in heaven. Of course. Otherwise, how are we going to cut off the heads of the 5 sects in the Ao family? Not bad. If they did not split open the skies, they would be trapped in the lower realm. Even if they were not concocted into a realm pill, they would still eventually die of old age. Therefore, if he wanted to avenge Ma Duobao, he had to split open the sky and enter the immortal realm to increase his strength. Only then would he have the qualifications to kill the 5 sects in the Ao family. The Eye of Heavenly Tao also went berserk. More and more chains of laws shot out from the eyeball, forming a heavenly net. And the tips of the chains were incredibly sharp, waiting for an opportunity to pierce through Ling Han's physique. Theoretically, the Eye of Heavenly Tao should be able to suppress Ling Han, because Ling Han had yet to comprehend the power of laws, but his power was too strong to the extent that he could shatter the laws. This caused the Eye of Heavenly Tao to be unable to do anything to him. Moreover, Ling Han's physique had not been used yet. Otherwise, if you wanted to attack, just attack. Could you pierce through my defenses on the level of godly metal? Ling Han suppressed the Eye of Heavenly Tao with one hand, and brandished the mountain and river axe to split open the skies with the other. He was clearly splitting his attention and power, but with a casual punch and a palm strike, the Eye of Heavenly Tao was sent flying by him, and with a casual swing of the axe, the heavens were sliced open by him, revealing the void. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was much stronger than Ma Duobao's. Splitting open the skies really had hope of success. Everyone became more and more nervous. Now, all their hopes were placed on Ling Han, and defeating the Eye of Heavenly Tao, or even splitting open the void, was nothing much. The biggest obstacle was still the lower realm. Ma Duobao had died of a grudge because of this, but what about Ling Han? Shwa shwa shwa. Ling Han's axe slashed out again and again, and the crack in the space became larger and larger, and the blurry silhouette of the immortal realm on the other side once again appeared in everyone's eyes. The Eye of Heavenly Tao went berserk. It had already sensed that the heaven and earth were about to split open, and it would also cease to exist. It naturally fought with all its might, and even more chains of laws shot out. The entire eye had turned black, and a frightening aura spread out. And Ling Han's gaze trembled. Why would there be black-colored demonic qi? It should be known that this small world of theirs was inclined towards the immortal realm, and would only ascend into the immortal realm after splitting open the skies, and not the netherworld. But why did the Eye of Heavenly Tao show signs of being demonized? Was it the netherworld's doing? Then I can't leave you alive. Ling Han humphed coldly. His left hand drew out the Revere Life Sword, and he slashed out with 10,000 techniques returned to one. With the support of the thunderclap ninth heaven, the sword ray slashed out and white lightning blazed. Pooh! The sword ray streaked past, and the Eye of Heavenly Tao was instantly sliced into two from the middle. The divine chains of laws swept about chaotically, and a large amount of blood gushed out. However, it fell from the skies, burning rapidly as it fell, no longer remaining in the mortal world. Before it even landed on the ground, the Eye of Heavenly Tao was completely burned into ashes. Between heaven and earth, there was a rain of blood. Everyone felt a strong sense of sorrow. This was the grief of heaven and earth. But at the same time, the majestic sound of a bugle horn reverberated between heaven and earth. This was a song of praise for heroes. Ling Han put away the Revere Life Sword, and focused on brandishing the axe. Shwa shwa shwa, as he slashed wildly with battle prowess of 23 stars of shattering void tier. The skies of the immortal realm came closer and closer. Shwa, it was at this moment that a sword ray that was 3,000 meters long struck over from the immortal realm. In regards to this, no one was surprised. Chapter 883. The next morning, Hu Feiyun asked curiously, Why did Big Sister Shui disappear in the middle of the night last night? Shui Yinyu was currently eating, and she instantly coughed when she heard this. She rolled her eyes at Ling Han. Wasn't it all because of this guy? He had called her out in the middle of the night to do some embarrassing things. Ling Han couldn't help but smile and said, You're just a child, so don't ask so many questions. Just eat your food properly. Hu Feiyun pouted. Why did they all treat her like a child? Her big sister was like this, and now Ling Han was also like this. She was furious. After eating breakfast, they continued on their journey. In this place, there weren't only creepy things like the misty soul-capturing flower and sacred beetles. There were also various godly medicines. Otherwise, the misty soul-capturing flower wouldn't have attracted so many people. That was because everyone thought that it was a godly medicine. On their way, they also discovered a few godly medicines. Unfortunately, they were a step too late, and the godly medicines had already been plucked. Some people were crude, and not only plucked away the godly medicines, they even destroyed their roots. However, there were also some people who were more careful. When plucking the godly medicines, they were very careful, and left the roots intact. They could wait for another 100 years, or even the 100 years after that to pluck them. Ling Han didn't hold back. When he found those with roots, he directly dug them into the Black Tower. Only in the Black Tower could the effects of the godly medicines be maximized. The smile on his face became brighter and brighter. He had really profited greatly this time. If he could have such a harvest every day, then to say nothing of other things, merely plucking herbs alone would be a great profit. However, sometimes his luck was good, and he could encounter 7 or 8 godly medicines in a day. Sometimes it wasn't so good, and he would encounter innumerable godly medicines in a day. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had already passed. Ding ding ding. The intense sounds of weapons clashing traveled over from ahead, and one could even see streaks of divine light soaring into the sky. It was clear that the battle was intense. Let's go. Hu Feiyun immediately became interested. Shui Yanyu, however, wasn't that curious and said, let's not be nosy. However, Hu Feiyun was already running in that direction, and she was extremely excited. They hadn't experienced any battles in these 7 days, so the 9th king's heart that yearned for excitement was already beating so wildly that she couldn't control it anymore. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu exchanged a look, and could only follow her. However, they weren't afraid either. Sun Moon tier elites couldn't enter this place, so Ling Han was practically invincible. At least they didn't have to worry about safety. There was a field of rubble ahead, and after passing through the rubble, the 2 sides of the battle appeared in front of them. There were 7 people on one side, while there were 25 people on the other side, and they had formed an encirclement that trapped the 7 people. Hand over the 9-layer divine lotus, and we can spare your lives, the encirclement said. Bullshit. Among the 7 people that were trapped, there was a beautiful woman with red hair. She was dressed in an extremely bold and unrestrained manner, and her upper body was clad in a shoulder-bearing armor that revealed her jade-like arms. In fact, even a portion of her towering peaks could be seen. The armor on her lower body only covered her thighs, revealing a pair of astonishingly long legs that were perfectly round and straight. However, her skin wasn't white. Instead, it was the color of wheat, and she exuded an astonishing vitality like a female leopard. You guys didn't kill us because you're afraid that we'll destroy the 9-layer divine lotus. If we hand over the 9-layer divine lotus, we'll die, she said with a humph. Ha 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 ha. The encirclement's members all laughed loudly. Don't worry, Leader Meng. The others will die, but you definitely won't. One of the encirclement's members laughed lewdly. I've long heard of Leader Meng's beauty. If we don't have a taste of Leader Meng, wouldn't that be too much of a waste? He. Ha ha ha. The encirclement's members laughed without the slightest scruple. The mystery realm was so vast, and the chances of others discovering their evil deeds were infinitely low. Even if they were discovered, they could just kill them all. How despicable. Hu Feiyun couldn't help but pull out her sword and charge forward. Evil thieves' sword. She charged out alone, and the encirclement's members were initially dazed. Then they laughed loudly. It was just a little girl. Wasn't this the same as sending a lamb into a tiger's den? She's also a beauty. Just nice, there's only one Leader Meng. How long do we have to wait in line? Even if the 3 of us go up together, we'll still have to wait for 7 rounds. If there's another beauty, then we'll only have to wait for 3 rounds. Huh. Boss, there's another beauty over there. These people's gazes landed on Shui Yanyu, and they immediately couldn't help but drool. This beauty was obviously even more beautiful. Furthermore, she had a seductive air that could make one's soul swoon. If I could sleep with this beauty once, I would be willing to lose 100 years of my life. These people all howled like wolves, and were incredibly excited. You're all thinking too much. Ling Han's feet moved as if he was flying, and he had already arrived in front of these people. He said calmly, "Get lost and I can spare your lives." He wasn't a bloodthirsty person, and he didn't know what kind of conflict there was between the two of them, so he didn't want to kill them all. "Brat, you're very arrogant, aren't you?" A brawny man in his 30s walked out. His clothes were unbuttoned, revealing a round belly. His face was full of muscles, and he held a large saber in his hand. His killing intent was very heavy. "Handsome. Thank you for your righteous rescue. However, these people are not to be trifled with. You should take advantage of the opportunity and leave quickly." The red-haired beauty called out loudly. "You've already gotten involved in this mess and you still want to leave?" One of the people surrounding them sneered coldly. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "They're just a bunch of trash. What's there to be smug about? You're seeking death." The big-bellied saber-wielding man's eyes were cold. Taking advantage of the moment when Ling Han was speaking, he suddenly leaped and slashed at Ling Han. He used his full power right from the start. Divine patterns intertwined, and his saber was also covered in divine light, exuding a terrifying chill. Pooh! A cold light flashed past, and the divine demon sword had already appeared. It slashed out on its own, and easily sliced through the opponent's saber. Then it continued to slash down, slicing the big-bellied saber-wielding man in two. Blood splattered and internal organs danced chaotically. Gasp! Everyone was inexplicably horrified, frightened by this sword. It was far too terrifying. How could the might of this strike be so domineering? Wang! The divine demon sword hovered beside Ling Han. There was no blood on its blade, yet it was exuding a terrifying murderous aura. As its level increased, the might exuded by this divine sword also became more and more terrifying. One had to realize that devouring gold metal could evolve into divine metal. Even if it hadn't reached this level yet, it was still countless times more powerful than ordinary godly metal. "Sir, how should I address you?" one of the surrounding people asked in a deep voice. He didn't dare to underestimate Ling Han anymore. Their group was all in the business of robbery, and they had spent money to buy a few slots to enter this place. They had also robbed a few people, and thus had a total of 25 slots. Even though they weren't prodigies, they had all reached the consummate level of the mountain river tier after countless years of cultivation. In their eyes, wouldn't 25 people be invincible if they joined forces? However, Ling Han had killed one of their companions with a single strike, so they didn't dare to be careless anymore. They finally realized that there were still prodigies in this world, and their battle prowess was far beyond their imagination. Chapter 884. Ling Han continued to split open the sky, and the mountain and river axe fell again and again. The heavens were torn apart, and they were finally connected to the immortal realm. Whoosh! The spiritual energy of the immortal world surged in like a boundless sea. "Fuck, I'm going to break through!" Helion Tianyun exclaimed. He was a descendant of the true dragon, and his bloodline was too powerful. He was unlike others who could not break through to the immortal level without the corresponding cultivation technique. However, he was different. As long as he had the environment of the immortal world, breaking through was as easy as drinking water. However, he hurriedly suppressed it. He had not polished the shattering void tier to the extreme, and did not want to break through so quickly. If it was before he got to know Ling Han, he naturally felt that battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier was already the limit, and there was no reason for him not to break through. However, after getting to know a freak like Ling Han, he also had the tendency of becoming a freak. He decided to try his best to reach the strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier before considering breaking through. He's still young, isn't he? Furthermore, if he broke through at this time, he would definitely be rejected by the lower realm, but there was also the skylocking great formation above his head, and being rejected would be courting death. He naturally wouldn't do it. Not only did the spiritual energy from the immortal world surge in, there was also a complete set of laws. Everyone felt as though they had grasped onto something. Some people directly sat down cross-legged and obtained the opportunity to break through. The sky had opened, but it was not yet complete success. That was because the gap between the heaven and earth was too small, and it was impossible for the entire lower realm to pass through. However, due to the pull of the immortal realm, the lower realm was also squeezing towards the immortal realm. It was like a pregnant woman, exerting force from both inside and outside, wanting to give birth to a baby. On the other side, the old man's expression finally changed. If this continued, even if Ling Han did not make a move, it was possible that the vast lands would directly pass through the gravitational pull of the immortal realm. He hurriedly left. A moment later, another old woman in purple appeared. She also had 4 suns and moons above her head, but the difference was that her suns and moons were all the same size. This was the true consummate level of the sun-moon tier. He had reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier, and if he didn't break through to the heavenly body tier, he wouldn't be able to advance any further. The purple-robed old woman coldly stared at Ling Han. Hong! A pair of phoenix wings that were tens of thousands of meters in length unfurled behind her back. Then she stretched out her right hand, and boundless blazing flames burned. Even though they were separated by 2 realms, it still caused people to feel a boundless chill. This fire can incinerate anything. Xiao, the old woman, flicked her finger, and a flame bomb shot over. It was very simple. There was no sword light or saber light that was thousands of meters long. There was only a fist-sized flame bomb. However, the power of this flame bomb was 10 times stronger than the previous blade light. Sure enough, even if they were all in the same minor realm, the gap between the early, middle, late, and peak stages was incomparably huge. It was no wonder that those who were able to fight across a minor realm could be called geniuses. This should be the strongest expert of the 5 sects in the immortal world. As long as he could block this attack, it would be considered a success, and he would have nothing to fear, right? Ling Han attacked with all his might, slapping towards the flame bomb. Boom, however, it was useless. Ling Han also seemed to have gone mad. The old woman's flame bombs were really quite terrifying, and even his physique showed signs of melting. Thus, he definitely could not let them continue burning, and had to finish splitting open the skies as soon as possible. Otherwise, he really might be burned and melted. The old woman on the other side was also anxious. Splitting open the skies was only a hair's breadth away, and if she did not stop it, the lower realm would become a cooked duck and escape. She also attacked at all costs, shooting out endless flame bombs that turned into a rain of fire that descended from the immortal realm. Open for me. Ling Han swung the axe for the last time. Hong! This gap was big enough, and the suction force from the immortal realm instantly increased by a few hundred times. The lower realm immediately accelerated and crashed towards the immortal realm. Xiao like a little bird breaking out of its shell. There was a great formation sealing off the outside, but how could the impact of a small world be blocked by a formation on the level of the mountain river tier? This formation immediately collapsed. The entire lower realm charged out along with the sea. Pong, pong, pong. Nearby, the purple-robed old woman, the white-haired old man, and the middle-aged man were all knocked to the ground, spitting out blood wildly. They actually dared to stop splitting open the skies. This was the backlash of the heaven and earth. Xiao they could only paralyze on the ground, watching helplessly as the lower realm flew towards the skies, instantly turning into a small dot and disappearing without a trace. Peng Ling Han fell from the skies. He shockingly discovered that he actually couldn't fly. It wasn't that the gravity here was so strong that he couldn't fly, but rather that some kind of regulation restricted him from flying. But immediately he discovered something different. The others were the same. They couldn't say for sure, but they only felt warm all over as if they were bathing in a hot spring, indescribably comfortable. They had entered the immortal realm. From now onwards, they were no longer ants of the lower realm, but rather citizens of the immortal realm. Long live! Everyone cheered, feeling sincere pride for their king. But very soon everyone was speechless, because the scenery around them was too dazzling. Under the regulation of the immortal realm, the lower realm began a long journey through the galaxy. They very soon arrived. The previous heaven and earth of the immortal realm had transformed from a gigantic continent into a sphere, and then into a dot. And in the boundless galaxy there were innumerable dots like this one. Chapter 885. Every point, is it a continent like before? How is that possible? That's round, wouldn't the person standing on the other end fall in? Is the divine realm that big? It's practically boundless. Everyone exclaimed in shock. They were used to the environment they were in, and the lower realm was really a continent with a round sky and square earth. But here the earth was round, shattering their understanding. What kind of sun is that big fireball? But is the sun so big? Those stars are actually continents, circular continents. The lower realm flew too fast, possibly surpassing any great elite in the divine realm. In an instant it passed through innumerable galaxies, and finally its speed slowed down. A huge planet appeared in front of them. It was mainly made of earthy yellow land, and the dark blue sea only took up 1/5 of the area. The lower realm fell, and a part of the earth split open as if giving way. The lower realm was big enough, but compared to this planet it was pitifully small, not even 1/10,000th. This planet could easily accommodate the entire lower realm. Hong, a muffled sound came from the earth. This was the continent being fixed. Even denser spiritual chi of heaven and earth assaulted, instantly allowing many people to complete their breakthrough. The level here was too high, and even a few breaths would allow these mortals to increase their tier. Ling Han's body was also restless. He had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and had the qualifications to break through. However, he chose to suppress it. In the lower realm, it was somewhat difficult to cultivate to the strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, but this was the divine realm, and there were all kinds of resources. Long live the Emperor! Long live the Emperor! The whole continent was cheering. Now they finally escaped the fate of becoming medicinal ingredients, and also became citizens of the divine realm. Their life level had improved greatly, and this would slowly manifest in the future. Above the imperial city, the totem of the Black Tower condensed into solid form, becoming more and more majestic. Countless flashes of spiritual chi and indescribable things poured into the totem of the Black Tower, and through this passed into the bodies of those who left their names on the totem of the Black Tower. Splitting open the sky, this was a magnificent feat that would receive the recognition and reward of the heaven and earth. Ling Han discovered that his strength was rapidly increasing. Shattering Void tier 14 stars, 15 stars, 16 stars. However, 2 days had passed. An increase of a whole 3 stars of power was too terrifying. This meant that his present battle prowess was about to approach 30 stars of Shattering Void tier. Additionally, he discovered that his physique had also undergone some changes. His spirit base moved, and was filled with divinity. Those who open up the heavens will be blessed with destiny. Luck was something that couldn't be explained clearly, and couldn't be touched, but it would definitely play a role. The whole nation was in jubilation. This was a joyous day that belonged to all the citizens of the Great Ling Empire. However, this beautiful moment did not last long. Very soon, the powerhouses of this planet arrived. Who is the Emperor? An arrogant voice rang out. A person stood atop the imperial palace and spoke in a condescending tone. This is a god. Even if Ling Han's present battle prowess was close to 30 stars of Shattering Void tier, the moment he saw his opponent, he knew that he was definitely not a match for him. The difference was too great. Even the weakest god would be several tens of thousands of times stronger than the most freakish Shattering Void tier cultivators. Now that there was no barrier separating them, a god would be a god, and their power would not be reduced in the slightest. Before opening the skies, Ling Han had already come to a realization. Thus, his expression did not change, and he merely said calmly, "I am here." Oh, that person was a man in a white robe who looked to be in his 30s. His figure was slender, and he deliberately displayed his strength. Behind him there was the image of a tall mountain. This meant that he was in the mountain river tier, but at most, he had only reached the middle stage of the low extreme. Because mountain river. How could it be considered complete if there was only a mountain without a river? In the immortal realm, this was an elite of the lowest level, but he could still be called an elite, crushing all the citizens of the lower realm. I am the special envoy of the East Void dynasty Yin Yongyi. Since you are the emperor, then immediately present a letter of credence and declare yourself a subject of my empire. He said calmly, extremely carelessly. In his eyes this was a matter of course. How many gods were there in the East Void dynasty? Millions of them. Any one of them could destroy this new world, so wasn't submitting to them a matter of course? Hearing these words, the citizens of the imperial capital all looked furious. After the battle of opening the skies, everyone regarded Ling Han as a true god. How could an invincible emperor be humiliated? Hehe, the East Void dynasty also dares to compete with my Anshui dynasty? Xiao, another one, rushed over and stood on top of the imperial palace, standing in confrontation with Yan Yongyi. Ha ha ha, have you all forgotten my Thunder Central dynasty? A third god flew over. Ling Han had heard Yi Shuang say before that land and citizens were very precious resources in the immortal realm, because this involved the power of the nation. Now that a new continent had arrived from a small world, which force wouldn't want a piece of the action? More importantly, opening the skies was rewarded by the heaven and earth. If they could swallow the power of the nation of the Great Ling Empire, it would be a great supplement to their own power of the nation. Ling Han stood solemnly and was speechless. He had already come to a realization, but he could wait for a good price to sell it for a good price, or at least to a relatively strong force. Then, after he left, the Great Ling Empire could guarantee relative safety, and not have to worry about being invaded. Xiao, with a flash of light, a flying boat pierced through the air and arrived. All of a sudden, the gods revealed solemn expressions. The immortal realm had its own regulations, and those that could fly with their physical bodies were definitely great elites. But possessing a flying god tool also meant a frightening background. To say nothing of anything else, the few gods that had arrived first had all run over on their own feet. It was only because they were closer that they arrived first. On this flying boat stood a man in flowing white robes. He looked only 26 or 27 years old, but being able to become an immortal, his lifespan was extraordinarily long, so one naturally couldn't judge his age by appearance. He carried a treasured sword on his back, and his aura was not obvious, so one couldn't judge his cultivation level from his outward appearance. Chaotic Star's majestic empire. But when everyone saw a symbol on the flying boat, they immediately shivered and showed expressions of respect. Just like in the lower realm, sects and factions couldn't be used carelessly, it was the same in the immortal realm. Imperial Empire, Majestic Empire, and Royal Dynasty represented a completely different level of strength. With a Sun-Moon tier overseeing, one could establish a nation in the immortal realm and establish a royal dynasty. Majestic empires required the Heavenly Body tier, and Imperial empires required the Eternal River tier. This definitely couldn't be done carelessly. Of course, for those like the Great Ling Empire, because they came from the lower realm, it was naturally a different matter. Is this the ruler? The man in white smiled at Ling Han and said, I am Xiang Chongyun, a disciple of the Lord Left Minister of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. Lord Xiang. Ling Han clasped his hands in greeting. This was the immortal realm, so he had to put away all his pride. However, it was easy to put away one's pride, and it was hard to break one's pride. His bones were still very strong, and he had the pride of not wanting to be disgraced. Oh. Chapter 886. Unexpectedly, this Xiang Chongyun was actually very easygoing, and did not put on the airs of an elite. This made Ling Han sigh with emotion. The more powerful a person was, the more approachable they were. Of course, this Xiang Chongyun was arrogant to the core. He was clearly standing there, but he did not take any of the empire's envoys seriously. Xiang Chongyun had come on behalf of the Lord Left Minister, and his goal was naturally to subdue the Great Ling Empire and become a vassal of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. To put it bluntly, he was a subordinate force of the Lord Left Minister. Dynasty was too powerful. They did not care about a small organization that had just opened up the sky. Ling Han asked him about the basic distribution of power here, and Xiang Chongyun did not hide anything, telling him the truth. This planet was called the Joint Peace Planet, and there were a total of 3 majestic empires, the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, and the J-Drop Majestic Empire. Under these 3 majestic empires there were hundreds of empires. The 3 empires were evenly matched in strength and had been at war with each other for many years, each wanting to annex the other. This also gave the dynasties the space to survive. All of them relied on the dynasties as vassals, and they fought fiercely for territory and population. Thus, the moment the Great Ling Empire opened the sky and appeared, the nearby royal dynasties immediately sent people over. However, they had not thought that the chaotic star's majestic empire would also move out. Even if it was only a representative of the left minister, that was still enough to make the other royal dynasties choose to give up. Are you tired of living fighting dynasty? After another while, the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire and the Jade Drop Majestic Empire also sent envoys, wanting to take the Great Ling Empire as a subordinate force. This wasn't because the Great Ling Empire had a large territory or a large population, but rather because it had come from splitting open the sky, and the power of the nation was greatly nourished. After some consideration, Ling Han decided to temporarily rely on the chaotic star's majestic empire. First of all, it would not do to not choose one of them to vote for. The other party seemed to be smiling and easy to talk to, but if he really wanted to turn hostile, he would definitely not be slower than flipping the pages of a book. Then, if he had to choose one, the chaotic star's majestic empire was still the best, because the Great Ling Empire was currently located closest to the chaotic star's majestic empire. This is for the sake of national security. Ling Han drew up a letter of credence and handed it over to Xiang Chongyun. From now on, the Great Ling Empire would be a vassal state of the chaotic star's majestic empire, and would have the obligation to pay tribute and obey orders, while the chaotic star's majestic empire would have the obligation to protect the Great Ling Empire. The instant he handed over the letter of surrender, the silhouette of a nine-tailed divine fox flew out of Xiang Chongyun's body and took a heavy bite at the Black Tower totem above the empire. Instantly, the Black Tower totem seemed to be heavily injured and became blurry, while everyone in the Great Ling Empire felt a sense of sorrow. This is a national disgrace, forced to become a vassal. Although everyone was prepared, many people were still furious and wanted nothing more than to have a grand battle. However, more people were rational. They had just entered the immortal world, so what qualifications did they have to fight with the powers of the immortal world? If you don't accept it, then cultivate as hard as you can. If you don't have the strength, you can only endure. Thinking about His Majesty, he even endured it. If it weren't for this empire, Your Majesty could have just left. The world is so big, there's no place for Your Majesty. With Your Majesty's talent, you'll definitely rise to prominence in the God realm. Since Your Majesty has chosen to endure for us, how can we disappoint Your Majesty? I want to become stronger. I want to share Your Majesty's burden. The citizens didn't collapse because of this humiliation. Instead, they became courageous after knowing the humiliation. Everyone held back their anger and wanted to cultivate with all their might so that the Great Ling Empire could look down on the world in the future and wouldn't have to bow down to any force. Your Majesty, please follow me to our empire's imperial capital to pay your respects to Lord Left Minister, Xiang Chongyun said with a smile. This trip had gone smoothly, and he was very satisfied. Even Ling Han had become much more pleasing to the eye. Ling Han had long since arranged everything, so he nodded and stepped onto the flying ship with Xiang Chongyun. He took one last look at the imperial capital and thought to himself, I'll definitely return. Your Majesty! Everyone knelt on the ground, and even the 7 kings knelt down on one knee. They watched Ling Han leave, all of their eyes red. Ling Han nodded and said, Cultivate well and don't disappoint me. As you wish, Your Majesty. Everyone said loudly. Xiang Chongyun chuckled and steered the flying ship. It instantly pierced through the skies. This ship was too fast, like a shooting star, causing Ling Han to be extremely shocked. He had already tried it. In the immortal realm, his speed was at least 100 times slower because the regulations here were different. Compared to this flying ship, he was practically as slow as a snail. On the way, Ling Han asked for guidance humbly, and gradually, the other party stopped putting on airs and directly called out Ling Han's name. This was an improvement. Majesty and whatnot actually carried a kind of mockery, as if reminding Ling Han that he was a hostage. The Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was an empress. She was in the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and her strength was unfathomable. This empress was not married yet, and it was said that she was not only as beautiful as a goddess, but also charming to the bone. There was once a rumor that the rulers of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire and Jade Drop Majestic Empire were both willing to give up their imperial titles as long as the Empress of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire was willing to marry. Though this was only a rumor, it could also be seen how great the charm of this Empress was. Below the Empress were the 9 kings, and the 9 kings were all female. The strongest was even in the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and the weakest was only in the mountain river tier. She had only been conferred the title a few years ago. As for why a mountain river tier could also be conferred the title of king, no one knew. In the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire, the Empress was the supreme authority. No one dared or could question her. Below the 9 kings were the left and right ministers. These two were mortal enemies, and the fact that they had become as incompatible as fire and water as they were now was naturally a deliberate action of the Empress of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. This was a balancing act of power. The left and right ministers definitely knew this, so even if they did not want to fight, they had to fight. Otherwise, they would definitely lose favor and even be suppressed. These two were also extremely powerful. It was said that they were both in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, but of course they were completely incomparable to the Empress. In addition, there were also the 7 generals. In terms of power and influence, they were slightly inferior to the left and right ministers, but their abilities were not low. They were similarly in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. However, the left and right ministers were in charge of internal affairs, while the 7 generals were in charge of external affairs, and were in charge of external warfare and defense. As for the other civil and military officials, Ling Han only listened casually. As for the specifics, he could slowly find out when he reached the imperial capital. Ling Han, you are able to break through a small world and enter into the immortal realm. So your talent is naturally extraordinary. You can enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy to study for a while. After Xiang Chongyun explained the power structure of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire, he suggested to Ling Han, "Please teach me, Lord Xiang." Ling Han said modestly, "The Scarlet Heaven Academy is the largest and best academy of our majestic empire. To say nothing else, the descendants of the left and right ministers, as well as the 7 great generals, are all studying there," Xiang Chongyun said with a smile. "Back then, I was also fortunate enough to stay in the Scarlet Heaven Academy for 387 years. Unfortunately, my aptitude was insufficient, and I was still chased out in the end." He paused and then continued, "If you can get to know some high officials or nobles in there, then with this layer of relationship, even if you cannot return to your own nation, you can at least come and go freely in the territory of this majestic empire, and no longer be trapped in the imperial capital." According to the rules, as a hostage, Ling Han could only stay in the imperial capital. If he took a step out, it would be seen as a provocation of imperial authority, and he could be directly executed. Ling Han nodded and hurriedly asked for the details of the Scarlet Heaven Academy. To be honest, if he wanted to break through to the immortal level, he had to obtain an immortal level cultivation technique. In terms of body arts, there was the 9 Dragons Tyrant body art, but in terms of origin power, there was no way. If he could not obtain the inheritance of a cultivation technique, he could only study it himself, and that would be too time-consuming. Chapter 887. Good Romance. P.S. Here is today's update, and at the same time, pull votes for Chidian 55th Fan Day. Everyone has a vote, and the vote will also send some coins, begging for everyone's support and appreciation. What everyone rushed up. Sure enough, there was no elixir left in that bottle. Only ashes were left at the bottom of the bottle. It can't be, right? Where are the other elixirs? They took down the bottles on the shelves and opened them one by one to check, but without exception, because too much time had passed, none of the elixirs could be preserved. This bottle was a disappointment, and it broke everyone's heart. Which bottle of elixir here was at least level 5, and one of them could be sold for a sky-high price. With so many elixirs added together, it was simply an indescribable wealth. But the dream of becoming rich didn't last long before they were slapped awake. Completely ruined? Wasn't this maddening? Ling Han didn't think it was strange. Time was the greatest enemy of all existences. So what if it was a divine pill? It would still decay. Of course, the higher the grade of the elixir, the harder it was to spoil. If it reached level 10 and above, then after a long time it might even become sentient, form intelligence and activate life. This was the so-called pill spirit, the most precious treasure in the world, because once a divine pill activated life, not only would its own medicinal effects not be lost, but it could also absorb the essence of heaven and earth, making the medicinal effects even stronger. However, to form a pill spirit, the first requirement was that the grade of the elixir surpassed level 10, and added with an incomparably long time, it might not succeed. Who would be willing to concoct a divine pill and leave it aside? Judging from the alchemical pills he concocted, this alchemist should be below level 9. Thus, the alchemical pills he concocted are all between level 5 and level 8. Ling Han murmured to himself. However, to me, pill recipes at this level are the best. Right now, I can barely concoct level 5 alchemical pills, but I'll soon be able to advance to the Sun Moon tier, so it won't be difficult for me to concoct level 8 divine pills. Let's search, there should be pill recipes here. After searching for a while, sure enough, he found a bookcase full of pill recipes. Each pill recipe needed the thickness of a book to record, and too much time had passed. These books had become incredibly fragile, and would turn into dust with a single touch. Thus, Ling Han first put this bookcase into the Black Tower. Then, it would be impossible for them to turn into dust even if they wanted to. He immediately made 2 copies, and then took out both the original copy and the copy, and said, Leader Meng, according to our previous agreement, both parties can make a copy of each pill recipe. I've already made a copy, and the original copy is also here. You can choose whichever one you like. When did you make a copy? Meng Wei was still rummaging through the alchemical pills, unwilling to give up. She wanted to see if any bottle of alchemical pills had survived. Go ahead. Ling Han wouldn't tell her that he had taken the time to enter the Black Tower and instantly made a copy. Moreover, he had made 2 copies. Meng Wei carefully compared the 2 copies, and after discovering that there wasn't a single word that was out of place, she nodded and said, It's so worry-free to cooperate with a handsome guy. Hey. Our cooperation is about to come to an end, so why don't we have a breakup party? I've endured it for so many days and it's so itchy. Scram. Ling Han put away 1 copy and left the original copy for her. In any case, it would shatter at the slightest touch. Could it be that my charm has decreased? There was a strange expression on Meng Wei's face, and she said, That's impossible. Her breasts aren't small, her waist isn't thick, and her butt is still perky. Why can't I get this handsome guy? Could it be that he doesn't like women? Gasp. I can hear you, Ling Han said in annoyance. Leader. Someone suddenly exclaimed. Their voice was filled with excitement. What? The sky hasn't collapsed yet. Even if it did, isn't there still this handsome guy to hold it up? Meng Wei said. There's a bottle of alchemical pills that hasn't been spoiled. Someone shouted. What? Meng Wei also jumped up and she rushed over. Even Ling Han was slightly curious, and he followed behind her. Most of the alchemical pills here had already turned to dust, but there was 1 bottle that hadn't been spoiled. Even those who didn't understand alchemy could guess that this bottle of alchemical pills was definitely extraordinary. That was why they had survived for such a long time. Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Meng Wei accepted the pill bottle and read the label on it. What alchemical pill is this? Everyone shook their heads. They had never heard of this pill before. This is a miraculous pill for Sun Moon tier cultivators. It can allow Sun Moon tier cultivators to advance by a subminor level, saving them tens of thousands of years of time, a voice suddenly said. Who? Everyone immediately turned around and walked toward the door. I'm Ji Zhengping. There was a person standing at the door. However, because it was extremely dark here, the light that shone behind him could only make out a pitch-black silhouette. Even so, it was still possible to tell that this person was extremely tall and slender. The person paused for a moment, and then said, Hand over the divine pill, and I'll spare your lives. What else? Meng Wei asked. What else? Ji Zhengping asked with a smile. He opened his right hand, and an egg-sized object appeared in his palm. This is a viper poison explosion pill. Once it's thrown, it will immediately explode. Then it will release a terrifying poison. Believe me, anyone below the Sun Moon tier, regardless of whether they're human or demonic beast, would be poisoned to death in half a breath's time after inhaling even a sliver of this poison. Meng Wei and the others were all astonished. Ji Jinping wasn't lying. The viper poison explosion pill was indeed that terrifying. However, whether or not the object in his hand was really the viper poison explosion pill was a question mark. I'll give you 15 minutes to consider. If you don't hand over the divine pill after that, I'll have no choice but to throw this viper poison explosion pill in, Ji Jinping said with a chuckle. I hate killing people the most, so don't force me. No one knew whether he was speaking the truth or not. However, if he was speaking the truth, then that would be far too terrifying. Meng Wei and the others didn't dare to act recklessly. They were all people who had lived on the edge of death. However, it was precisely because of this that they cherished their lives. As long as they were alive, everything was possible. However, if they were dead, then they would lose everything. Ling Han frowned. Ling Han frowned. He too could not determine whether Ji Jinping was bluffing, or if he really had a powerful weapon in his hands. He wasn't afraid. However, what if he dragged Meng Wei and the others into this? Since that was the case, he silently hid in the shadows. Then he unleashed the annihilating Dragon Star arrow. He didn't need to use the ultimate technique. With his current strength, he could insta-kill a consummate level being with a normal arrow. Ji Jinping smiled. He was very pleased with himself. He had completely controlled the situation by himself, and this made him feel very good about himself. However, a strong sense of danger suddenly welled up in his heart. This caused his heart to violently contract, and all the pores on his body to close up. Danger! At this moment he couldn't care about anything else, and he hurriedly retreated. Xiao! A streak of cold light streaked past. It was astonishingly fast, and it forcibly pierced through his left shoulder. The powerful force of the arrow sent him flying. It was almost 55, and he hoped that he could continue to charge into the 55 red envelope rankings. On the 5th of May, he would be able to receive a rain of red envelopes to reward his readers and promote his works. Piece of cake was also love. It was definitely better to enjoy it. Chapter 888. Not coming out, you still have some ability. The young girl looked surprised. Shattering Void Tier 1 star was one world, and this was also applicable in the Divine Realm. From 9 stars of Shattering Void Tier onwards, those with battle prowess above 10 stars were pitifully few, and 14 stars was another great threshold. If only 1% of people could reach battle prowess above 10 stars of Shattering Void Tier, then only 1 in 10,000 could reach battle prowess of 15 stars. Although the young girl didn't go all out, a casual attack would at least have battle prowess of 13 stars or 14 stars, but her opponent could actually fight evenly with her, which naturally surprised her. Again, her competitive spirit rose, and she immediately launched a storm-like attack at Ling Han. Ling Han had lived 2 lives, and knew that this kind of young lady wasn't to be trifled with. It would be fine if he lost, but if he won, she definitely wouldn't give up. However, he also had pride. Why would he lose? Thus he casually blocked, maintaining a situation where they were evenly matched. The young girl's repeated attacks failed, and when her temper flared, she couldn't care about holding back anymore. As her hands moved, she went all out, determined to defeat Ling Han. Unfortunately, Ling Han's current strength alone reached 16 stars. As the saying went, one could defeat 10 with pure strength. Even if he didn't use any techniques, he could still crush her. Ling Han obviously wouldn't do that. He only maintained a situation where they were evenly matched, and even made the young girl feel that he had a slight advantage, but couldn't completely suppress her. The Divine Realm space was indeed stable. Ling Han, however, placed his thoughts elsewhere. If 2 elites with battle prowess of 16 stars of Shattering Void Tier battled in the lower realm, there was no suspense. Not to mention this garden, even the whole Point Star City would be destroyed. But now, the repercussions of their power only lightly fluttered a few leaves in the garden, as if they had returned to the body-refining tier. Pong pong pong, the two fought fiercely, but it was basically the young girl attacking and Ling Han defending. A good man didn't fight with a woman. What would winning against this woman prove? Ling Han now wanted to defeat the 5 sects in the Ao family, and in the future become an elite that surpassed the Rock Palace. Wei, stop! A dignified voice was heard. Ling Han was originally on the defensive. As long as the other party stopped attacking, he would naturally stop as well. The initiative lay in the girl's hands. No, I must defeat him. I'm so close, said the young girl with a pout. Her naivety was very cute. Two people walked out of the house. One was a man who looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a robe embroidered with an official's robe. He exuded an imposing aura even though he was not angry. The other person was Xiang Chongyun, who respectfully followed behind the man, his hands pressed against the sides of his thighs, as if he was a servant. Needless to say, this middle-aged man was the current left minister Li Chang, also known as Minister Li. He was a super elite of the heavenly body tier. You little girl, after fighting for so long, don't you know that he's going easy on you? Minister Li laughed. What? The girl immediately stopped and tilted her head to look at Ling Han. Hey, tell me the truth. Did you go easy on me? Fourth Miss has extraordinary talent and strength. Ling Han did not answer directly. Instead, he beat around the bush and began to praise the young girl's talent in martial art. He was not flattering her. She was indeed extraordinary. The young girl was immediately overjoyed. She did not realize that Ling Han had secretly changed the topic. She raised her head proudly. Her snow-white neck was elegant like the neck of a swan, making one feel comfortable just looking at it. Her name was Li Weiwei, and she was the left minister's fourth daughter. She was also the youngest daughter. The left minister had a total of 4 daughters, while the right minister had 8 sons. They really lived up to their rivalry. Minister Li said, "Little girl, do you know that this young man has just come from a small world? Oh, isn't it just shattering the void?" Li Weiwei said disapprovingly. With the size of Joint Peace Planet, there would be several thousand people descending here from small worlds every year. On average, there would be at least 10 per day. You only shattered the void when you reached the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. You're really timid. She was a little disdainful. Advancing into the shattering void tier meant that one had the right to shatter the void and enter the realm of immortals. Even if you were careful, you should have acted when you reached the 5th or 6th layer. However, delaying until the 9th layer to come to the realm of immortals was really too cowardly. Minister Li revealed a cunning smile and said, "Weiwei, how about we make a bet?" "Bet on what?" Li Weiwei asked casually. "Bet on the outcome of your battle with Ling Han," Minister Li said with a smile. Minister Li smiled and said, "If you win, I won't care about you anymore. You can go wherever you want to play." "Okay, don't go back on your word." Li Weiwei was instantly delighted. She had always wanted to leave the imperial city and go out for a walk, but Minister Li was always worried about this and that, protecting her tightly. She was afraid that her father would go back on his word, and immediately got into a fighting stance with Ling Han. Minister Li waved his hand and said, "If you lose, how could I possibly lose?" Li Weiwei interrupted. In the present world, only she, a shattering void tier elite, dared to interrupt the words of an elite of the heavenly body tier. Minister Li naturally would not be angry. Though he had 4 daughters, the first 3 had already married several tens of thousands of years ago, and this youngest daughter had only been born over a dozen years ago. She was also the one he doted on the most. If you lose, you will have to at least reach the mountain river tier to be able to leave the imperial city, and only leave the chaotic star's majestic empire when you reach the sun-moon tier," he said with a smile. No matter how she thought about it, there was no reason for her to lose, all right? Li Weiwei nodded. At present, she only wanted to defeat Ling Han. Then, she would be able to leave the imperial city, travel to various parts of the country, and enjoy a carefree life. She charged out and launched an attack at Ling Han. Ling Han was still the same as before, casually parrying her attacks. He did not want to become the tool of this father and daughter's wager, but it seemed to be unavoidable. "Ling Han, I am counting on you. You must win," Minister Li said to Ling Han with a smile. Though he was all smiles, there was a supreme dignity in his voice. This was because he was an elite of the heavenly body tier, and also because he was the left minister of a majestic empire. Ling Han sighed. If he disobeyed, then the left minister would definitely make things difficult for him. This kind of elite, this kind of nobility, it was really too easy to deal with him. There definitely would not be a single person willing to stand up for him. Moreover, even if the left minister killed him, so what if he established another puppet? He increased his battle prowess slightly, and instantly gained the upper hand, but he still left some face for Li Weiwei, and spent over 100 moves to defeat her. Li Weiwei couldn't accept it. How could this be possible? A martial artist from the lower realm who was so cowardly that he needed to be in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier to dare enter the immortal realm could actually surpass her in battle prowess. She shook her head blankly, and after a while she said, "I'm not convinced. Let's compete again." Minister Li laughed heartily and said, "Silly girl. Ling Han is the master of a small world. He just succeeded in splitting open the sky a few days ago, and brought the entire small world to the divine world." Only then did Li Weiwei realize that she had misunderstood him previously. It turned out that Ling Han was not afraid of death, but had delayed to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier because he wanted to split open the sky. To be able to split open the sky, one must be an outstanding talent of the present age. She had been tricked by both her father and Ling Han. Damn it. She was angry. Chapter 889. Li Weiwei stared at Ling Han. It was one thing for her father to lie to her, but what right did a stranger have to bully her? How did she offend you for you to treat her like this? Haha, if you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. In the future, obediently go to the Scarlet Heaven Academy, and don't always think of running around, Minister Li said sternly. He was really afraid that his precious daughter would act against him when her temper flared up. Li Weiwei pouted. She naturally didn't dare to disobey her father's orders, but this brat Humph, he wouldn't let it go so easily. She would definitely teach him a lesson. Ling Han saw her expression and knew that this little girl wouldn't leave it at that. But what could he do? The left minister had already said so. If he deliberately lost to Li Weiwei, then he would be acting against the left minister, and the consequences of the two were completely different. However, he wasn't afraid of this unruly young lady's words, but he was afraid that she would bring out an immortal level elite. If that Ling Han didn't want to expose the secret of the Black Tower, then he could only endure for a while. "Don't force me," Ling Han said inwardly. He seemed easygoing, but the pride in his body was firm. If worst came to worst, he would fight. Li Weiwei, you have to learn more from Ling Han. He came by splitting open the sky, and his talent in martial art is who knows how much higher than yours. Minister Li used Ling Han as a role model, wanting to properly educate his daughter. If this was used on any of his subordinates, they would definitely be filled with fear and trepidation. Even if they were just putting on an act, they would still ask Ling Han for guidance. However, how could Li Weiwei possibly care? If she really was obedient, would there be a need for the left minister to deliberately set up a trap for a bet? No matter how powerful a person was, he would still have a weak spot. Minister Li's weak spot was obviously this little daughter. He spoiled her to the core, and even couldn't bear to rebuke her. Li Weiwei was still humming, her bright eyes constantly glancing at Ling Han. Naturally, she was not the slightest bit unconvinced. However, she was still very curious. This brat obviously didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, so how could he split open the sky? Every year, the number of Shattering Void tier cultivators that entered the immortal realm from the lower worlds numbered in the thousands. It was not strange at all, but at least in the history of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, there had never been such a case before. This was a man who had created history. She would have been very curious about him, but now she only had one thought: to teach this arrogant, black-bellied fellow a good lesson. He actually dared to trick her. She humphed and said, "That's only the cultivation of the Shattering Void tier that's slightly more powerful, and it's not certain whether he can break through to the immortal level. If he doesn't reach the immortal level, then no matter how freakish he is, he'll still be suppressed with a flip of his hand. Moreover, the immortal level has 5 major tiers and 20 minor tiers, and each step is more difficult than the last. There's still a lot to climb, so there's nothing to be proud of." Minister Li laughed out loud and shook his head. "You are not as skilled as others. You still dare to be so arrogant after losing." "Humph, your daughter was just careless." Li Weiwei ran to Minister Li's side and shook his arm. She then stared at Ling Han, pointed at him and said that, "Han, let's compete again in 10 days. However, it will be during the assessment of the Northern institution. I don't believe that I can't defeat you. Now that things had come to this, giving in would not make the other party give up. Instead, it would make the other party despise him even more. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "All right, then we'll compete again when the time comes." He was calm and collected, as if he didn't take it seriously at all. Li Weiwei was so angry that she wanted to stomp her feet. This bastard brat, how dare he look down on her like this? It had to be known that she was one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial city. Who knew how many descendants of generals and ministers wanted to marry her? But she didn't care about them at all. You're just a country brat and you're blind. No, she couldn't wait for 10 days. If she had to endure this anger for 10 days, she would definitely explode in anger. Li Weiwei immediately turned around and left. She wanted to find someone to help suppress Ling Han, or else she wouldn't be able to sleep at night. This girl was used to being willful, and even Minister Li couldn't stop her. He couldn't keep a straight face and berate her sternly, so he could only shake his head and smile bitterly. However, his expression immediately turned serious, and he said to Ling Han, "Tell me about that small world of yours, and the situation of splitting open the skies." Ling Han told him most of the situation truthfully, but naturally wouldn't mention the matter of the Black Tower, nor would he mention that he had a previous life. There were also some important information that he withheld, such as the Rock Palace, and the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. In any case, this had nothing to do with splitting open the skies. The left minister was a very cautious person. After asking about every detail of splitting open the skies, he finally nodded and said, "I heard from Chongyun that you want to enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy yourself." "Yes," Ling Han said solemnly. Even if he had lived 2 lives, he was still who knew how many millennia younger than the left minister. Moreover, the latter was an elite of the heavenly body tier, so it was only right that he be more respectful. In the world of martial art, the strong would always receive respect. However, Ling Han would definitely not bow and bend his knees. With his pride and unyielding character, how could he kneel and bend his waist? Minister Li smiled and said, "Since you can split open the skies, your battle prowess must have reached 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. In this batch of new students, your battle prowess should be the first. However, the Scarlet Heaven Academy's assessment isn't battle prowess, but rather talent in martial art, the strength of one's spirit and battle skills. It's very difficult for you to enter the top 10 or even top 3. He didn't look at Ling Han at all. How could a martial artist from a small world compare to the geniuses here in terms of talent? With the guidance of an elite of the immortal level, there was no need to mention battle skills. The martial artists from a small world were far inferior. And the spirit was the biggest shortcoming of martial artists from a small world. You only start to cultivate your spirit when you reach the Shattering Void tier. But the descendants of nobles like Li Weiwei received all kinds of treasures to nurture their spirit at birth. Even if it was only 10 or 20 years, the strength of their spirit would surpass that of the people from a small world by many times. Thus, if it was determined by martial arts, then Ling Han would basically be the first. However, according to the usual assessment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, it would be extremely difficult for Ling Han to enter the top 10, let alone the first. "I'm willing to try," Ling Han said. He was full of confidence in himself. Minister Li nodded. With his cultivation level and status, being able to take the time to see Ling Han was already giving him enough face. The main thing was that Ling Han had come by splitting open the sky. This was too rare, so he wanted to see him. Since he had seen him, he gave him a few words of encouragement. After all, he was also his subordinate. "For these 10 days you will stay here first. You can move after you've entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy." Ling Han nodded and said, "I've troubled my lord." Xiang Qingyan didn't need Minister Li to speak at all. He had already made an inviting gesture towards Ling Han, and said, "Lord Left Minister needs to rest. I'll send you to the side courtyard to rest." The two of them went out. Minister Li stroked his beard and muttered, even if his talent isn't the best, being able to come by splitting open the sky, he must have something outstanding about him. If he can shine in the assessment, this minister can nurture him a little. After all, it's almost time. Therefore, after being egged on by Li Weiwei, he had run over to give Ling Han a favor in order to curry favor with Li Weiwei. "You've offended the fourth miss. Hurry up and kneel down and apologize," said Luo Lai arrogantly. He had heard from Li Weiwei that Ling Han had come from a small world, so he naturally didn't want to fight with Ling Han. He felt that doing so would be an insult to him. Deserve it. A pariah from a small world. Li Weiwei was immediately dissatisfied. She did not want Ling Han to kneel down and apologize, but to defeat Ling Han. These were two completely different concepts. When it came to power, Luo Lai could compete with her, so why should she drag him over to her side? Ling Han, on the other hand, smiled faintly. Regardless of whether it was a small world or the immortal realm, the people were all the same. The only difference was that the people in the immortal realm were slightly more powerful. However, the descendants of nobles and aristocrats were still inevitably arrogant and bossy. "It's an illness. It has to be treated. I don't have the habit of kneeling to others. Why don't you demonstrate for me?" he said, not giving any face to the other party, nor to Li Weiwei. He finally understood that this kind of unruly young lady could not be spoiled. The more she was spoiled, the more unreasonable she would become. Luo Lai's expression immediately darkened. "A lowly commoner from a small world dares to talk back to me? Do you know what my Luo family represents? A title personally conferred by the Empress can be inherited from generation to generation." Ling Han's face immediately darkened, and he said, "You keep saying the word lowly commoner all day, but you can't show your nobility. Apologize to me, or I'll beat you until you beg for mercy." Ha 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 ha. Luo Lai laughed so hard that he held his stomach and said, "I'm dying of laughter. A lowly commoner from a small world like you actually dares to ask me to apologize to you? Are you worthy? Are you worthy?" He asked 3 times in a row, "Are you worthy?" His disdain was evident in his words. Ling Han said coldly, "This is the left minister's residence. I live here, so I am the left minister's guest. You came to Prime Minister's was mansion and humiliated his guest. You are not taking Prime Minister's was seriously." "Fuck." Luo Lai stilled, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "You really know how to put on a false front. I only called you a lowly commoner, and that is the truth. How is that not taking Prime Minister's was seriously? These words can't be taken as truth. Otherwise, even if he was the descendant of the Luo family, he would still lose a layer of skin. Looking down on Prime Minister's wa. This is a great crime. Don't talk nonsense." He panted. "Since that is the case, why aren't you kneeling?" Ling Han suddenly raised his voice. Luo Lai was so frightened that he almost knelt. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and stopped in time. "Damn it. Are these two different things? Why do I have to kneel?" Luo Lai came to a realization. Why did he have to follow Ling Han's train of thought? He panted, and his eyes were about to spit fire. A dignified young master of the Luo family was actually led by the nose by a lowly commoner from a small world. He took out a sword from his spatial spirit tool, held it in front of his chest, and said, "Congratulations, you have successfully angered me. I will teach you a good lesson and let you know that this is not a small world. With your bit of strength, you are only fit to tuck your tail between your legs and be a tortoise." Li Weiwei was also very displeased. "I asked you to fight, so what are you grumbling about?" However, the two of them were finally going to fight, so she threw this little bit of displeasure to the back of her mind. She didn't tell Luo Lai that Ling Han actually came from opening the sky, and only casually said that he came from a small world. Otherwise, she believed that he definitely wouldn't dare to fight with Ling Han. In her eyes, the one who really wanted to fight wasn't Luo Lai, but his brother Luo Ba, one of the 3 great young elites of the imperial city. It didn't matter. Once Luo Lai was defeated, the Luo family would lose face, so how could Luo Ba just sit back and watch? From this point, Li Weiwei was actually very law-abiding. Otherwise, it would be easy for her to mess with a shattering void tier cultivator, and there were plenty of elites in the Prime Minister's residence. However, it could also be seen that she was also very proud, and disdained to use her status to suppress Ling Han. She would climb back up from where she had fallen. However, Luo Lai was naturally tricked by her. Chapter 891. A Beautiful Romance. Even if her opponent was a ginseng, Shunju clearly couldn't allow the old ginseng to attack her chest. She hurriedly activated her origin power shield. Pooh! The old ginseng unleashed a beam of regulation light, which forcibly sliced through the origin power shield. Pieces of cloth flew through the air, and Shunju's bra was instantly torn open. However, to the old ginseng's disappointment, there wasn't a towering jade mountain beneath this white dress. Instead, there was a golden undergarment that tightly wrapped around her chest. Could this be the legendary golden breasts? The old ginseng couldn't take his eyes off her, and even saliva was dripping from his mouth. However, he was a spiritual medicine of heaven and earth, and his saliva was also incredibly fragrant. It could be said to be an extremely nourishing medicine. Despicable brat, you actually dare! The old ginseng roared in fury as he charged toward Ling Han. Be bastard! Shunju's body trembled in fury. She was one of the 6 king tiers, yet she was actually being teased by a ginseng. How could she not be enraged? Fortunately, she was wearing a treasured robe. Otherwise, she would really have to expose herself to the old ginseng. She was enraged and she waved her slender hands. Terrifying divine chains intertwined and shot toward the old ginseng. She no longer had any intention of capturing him alive. In any case, ginseng could be eaten even if it was smashed. Thus, the medicinal effects of the ginseng would only be slightly affected. Golden breasts, why are you so fixated on your grandpa? The old ginseng teased as he dodged and said, this brat is also a part of the people who killed your golden breasts. Why don't you beat him up as well? He was still complaining about being wronged. Die! Shunju screamed. She was a king tier of the younger generation, and she should have been calm and composed. She wouldn't be shocked even if the sky collapsed before her eyes. However, this old ginseng was far too provocative. He had enraged her in just a few moves, and she wouldn't stop until she tore him into pieces. There's nothing I can do about it. Grandpa Ginseng is too handsome, and this golden breasts wants to kill Grandpa Ginseng so that she can accompany him forever. The old ginseng sighed, and it was as if he was bursting with narcissism. Grandpa Ginseng is truly a sinner. Ling Han felt an urge to vomit. He teamed up with Shunju as he said, Despicable ginseng, I've never seen anything more shameless than you. Of course, Grandpa Ginseng is one of a kind. The old ginseng said smugly. However, he immediately flew into a rage and said, You dare to insult your grandpa? This old ginseng was far too despicable. He was taking advantage of others as soon as he opened his mouth. Inescapable net. Shunju shouted and her regulations and origin power intertwined, forming a massive net. Ling Han also unleashed the crimson ground locking net, and it shot toward the old ginseng. The old ginseng's front, back, left, and right were all sealed off. Shio! He instantly disappeared. He was a ginseng that grew in the soil, and after he achieved Dao, his abilities in this area hadn't disappeared. Instead, they had become even more powerful. His earth escape technique was astonishingly powerful. He disappeared. Shio! Just as Shunju was about to say that he had disappeared, the old ginseng suddenly burst out from the ground. This ginseng was truly despicable. He had actually burst out from between Shunju's feet, and he was charging toward Shunju's lower abdomen. Die! Shunju was infuriated, and her black hair danced in the wind. Divine light also intertwined around her body, transforming her into a layer of ice and frost. Ah, your grandpa is freezing to death. The old ginseng was frozen into a ball, and he fell to the ground with a paw. However, they were all killed by Ling Han, and stored into the Black Tower as food. He had accumulated a great amount of spiritual meat, and after eating it with Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun every day, they could clearly feel the increase in their stamina. After another few days, another mountain appeared in front of them. However, Ling Han definitely didn't believe that this was a naturally formed mountain. That was because this mountain was completely like a soaring eagle, and every detail of it could be seen clearly. Could it be that this mountain had been formed after the death of a demonic beast? Immortal-level demonic beasts could easily reach tens of thousands of meters in height. Thus, although this eagle mountain was ridiculously tall, It wasn't impossible that it had been formed from a demonic beast. Moreover, this was the place where the most intense battles were taking place in the entire mystery realm. Thousand Source True Fluid would appear here. Every day, when the sun and moon intersected, a drop of Thousand Source True Fluid would fall from the eagle's beak on the mountain. However, after the ancient site opened, Thousand Source True Fluid would only appear after about 3 months. Moreover, it would only last for 10 days. After tens of thousands of years, everyone naturally knew this pattern. Everyone guessed that some kind of change would occur when the ancient site opened, and this change would slowly form Thousand Source True Fluid. As for the specifics, no one knew. Looking at the time, there were still a few days until the 3-month deadline. Ling Han sized up the mountain, and he suddenly had the urge to run up it. Reading on his phone would be more refreshing. Chapter 892. Li Weiwei was taken aback, and hurriedly stopped Ling Han and said, "Do you know why the Scarlet Heaven Academy doesn't assess by battle prowess, but by martial art talent, spirit and battle technique?" "Oh, why?" Ling Han asked with a smile. He actually didn't want to talk nonsense with this unruly young miss. The regulations of the immortal realm were perfected, and he planned to take advantage of these 10 days to cultivate the power of regulations. Maybe he couldn't touch it in 10 days, but it was better than wasting it. Li Weiwei was furious. Why did this guy always look like he despised her? It was like this in front of her father, and now when they were alone it was also like this. One had to know that she was one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial city, and who knew how many young heroes wanted to be alone with her. This blockhead of this small world had something wrong with his brain, so he didn't know her beauty. No, he was just a block of ice. That's right, or else why would he be called Ling Han? She snorted and said, "Because the longer you stay in the Shattering Void tier, you can always improve your battle prowess a little. But in this world, the most important thing is cultivation level. Your martial art talent and spirit determine the speed of your advancement in the immortal level, and battle technique is the key to victory in a battle of equals." "Makes sense." Ling Han nodded. This was indeed the case, so he obviously agreed. Li Weiwei had the urge to strangle Ling Han. She said so much, and he dismissed her with a "makes sense." She pouted and said, "Blockhead, I'll wait for you to be dealt with. Also, 10 days later if I win, you'll have to kneel down and sing Conquered." Ling Han laughed loudly. How could he lose? He nodded and said, "It's a deal. But what if I win?" "If you win, pa, if you win, then you win. Or do you want me to sing Conquered for you?" Li Weiwei wanted to make bold claims, but thinking of the strength Ling Han displayed before, she hurriedly changed her mind at the last minute. "I'm the daughter of the left minister, so I can be so willful and infuriate you to death." Ling Han only smiled faintly and didn't take it to heart. He walked around Li Weiwei and entered the room. Li Weiwei still wanted to stop him, but after thinking about it, she gave up on the idea. It would be better to wait for Luoba to challenge Ling Han. In 10 days at most, she would also be able to have another match with Ling Han. She did not believe that she would lose to Ling Han in terms of martial art talent, divine soul and battle techniques. As long as she won one, she would be able to show off. Winning one was still winning, and as for losing the other 2, if that blockhead dared to mention this to her, she would chop off that blockhead's head. Ling Han returned to his room and began to cultivate in seclusion. Once one advanced into the flower blossom tier, they would be able to transcend the mortal world. It was only a mere 10 days, and he did not want to cause any trouble. The regulations of the immortal realm were complete, and one could tell from the extremely limited destructive power of Shattering Void tier that the space of this realm was terrifyingly stable. In a sense, the divine realm was the process of comprehending the power of rule. At different stages, the rule force mastered would be different. Hence, the destructive power would be different as well. If they reached the Genesis tier, they would be able to destroy countless regulations with a single thought, and could easily destroy an entire planet. They were incredibly terrifying. However, whether the low extreme of the Genesis tier was enough, or if they had to reach the consummate level of the Genesis tier, no one knew. After all, Yishuangshuang was only in the Sun-Moon tier, and Xiangchengyun was only in the Mountain River tier, so it was impossible for them to know what kind of power each of the 4 minor tiers of the Genesis tier possessed. Ling Han closed his eyes and used his spirit to come into contact with this world, comprehending the power of rule. The initial stage of the Shattering Void Tier had such qualifications. Moreover, he also refined a sliver of demonic chi from the Azura Demon Emperor, and possessed some of the power of Netherworld's regulations. Although the power of regulations of the two realms was completely different, they were at least on the same level, and there was at least some reference value. He suddenly had a strange thought. If I could grasp the power of regulations of the immortal realm and Netherworld at the same time, how would it be? One hand would be yin, and one hand would be yang, as if heaven and earth opposed each other. With such a strike, who could block it? However, he immediately shook his head. The regulations of the immortal realm were easy to comprehend, but the regulations of the Netherworld, he had only passively grasped a sliver, and was still worlds apart from mastering the minor level. Unless there's a chance to go to the Netherworld, this was not impossible. The immortal realm had a weak point in the barrier between the two realms. The Netherworld could charge in, and the immortal realm could also charge out. This requires extremely powerful strength. If I go there now, it would be equivalent to throwing my life away. Moreover, I haven't even grasped the power of regulations of the immortal realm, so why should I be in a rush to think about the Netherworld? He couldn't help but laugh, secretly thinking that he was too greedy. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days time passed quietly. Unexpectedly, the Luo clan actually did not make any move. Perhaps they knew that Ling Han would participate in the examination of the Northern Institution, and planned to settle the score with Ling Han at that time. On the other hand, Li Weiwei seemed to be at loggerheads with Ling Han. At most, she would come every other day, showing off her strength but leaving angrily. However, she could not learn to be obedient, and would come back the next day to be bullied again. 10 days passed very quickly, and Ling Han stopped. He opened his right hand, and there were slivers of golden light intertwining in his palm. That was the power of regulations, but it was too weak. Limited by cultivation level, whether it was the Shattering Void Tier, Mountain River Tier, or other levels, there was a limit in the grasp of the power of regulations. And now, Ling Han was extremely far from the limit of the Shattering Void Tier. If this limit was compared to 100, then he had not even reached one. I seem to have reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void Tier, but there are too many areas that can be improved, and it is indeed not suitable to break through to the immortal level. Looking at the immortal realm, it was clear that people like Xiao Miaoyan and Wu Gaoyuan had long reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void Tier, and their battle prowess had even reached 18 stars, but why hadn't they broken through to the immortal level? It wasn't that they couldn't, but it wasn't time yet. If they broke through now, it would affect their battle prowess in the immortal level. Who didn't want to be a 1-star, 2-star genius, or even 3-star, 4-star genius, and even limited to the legendary 5-star genius? Blockhead, blockhead! Li Weiwei ran over in a hurry. The Northern Institution's enrollment examination has begun. Hurry, hurry, hurry. This lady must beat you today, and let you sing the song of conquest. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Okay, lead the way." Li Weiwei instantly rolled her eyes and said, "Why should this lady lead the way? Do you think this lady is your slave?" "I don't know the way," Ling Han answered. Li Weiwei couldn't help but be speechless. This reason was really too sufficient, leaving her with no room to refute. She gritted her teeth hatefully. Why did this blockhead always have a way to make her angry? She wasn't a petty person, but in front of Ling Han, she would always have violent impulses. "Follow this lady." She led the way in front and then emphasized, "This lady is not leading the way for you, but you are this lady's follower, understand?" Ling Han only chuckled, and Li Weiwei almost went berserk again. Chapter 893. When the 4th young mistress of the left minister went out, although there was no great entourage, when Ling Han and Li Weiwei went out, there were immediately 4 inconspicuous people following behind them. These were the bodyguards that the left minister had arranged for Li Weiwei, and each of them was an elite in the consummate level of the Mountain River Tier. There were not many forces in the entire Chaotic Star's majestic empire that could have such elites as bodyguards. With the strength of Ling Han and Li Weiwei, it was naturally impossible for them to discover that there were 4 elites following behind them. They headed east. The Scarlet Heaven Academy was on the east side of the imperial capital, close to the city gates. They sat in a carriage that belonged to the left minister's residence. As they passed, passers-by all gave way, and even the patrolling soldiers stopped and saluted respectfully. It was evident how powerful the left minister was. In a small world, flying spirit tools only had one function, and that was to save the energy of martial artists. Their own speed would not be faster than that of martial artists, or rather much faster. But in the immortal realm, most of the vehicles were faster than martial artists. Needless to say, flying god tools were something that only elites or forces at the level of the left minister could take out. Thus, although the imperial capital was ridiculously large, they arrived at the north gate of the academy in about 15 minutes. Although there was only one Scarlet Heaven Academy, because there were 4 branches, the 4 branches each occupied an entrance. For example, the Northern Institution used the North Gate. Generally speaking, students from different branches would never visit each other. The competition between the 4 branches was extremely fierce. If the students from the Northern Institution went to the territory of the Eastern Institution, they were guaranteed to be beaten black and blue. At this time there were already many people waiting at the gate. Although the Scarlet Heaven Academy would recruit students once every 5 years, this imperial capital was too big, and the number of students that could enter each time was less than 1 in 10,000. The elimination rate was shockingly high. Thus, the first test was naturally to fool people. Those with poor aptitude from the start were directly eliminated to avoid wasting time. The left minister's signboard was indeed useful. Although this carriage could not enter the academy, they were able to cut in line and cross the sea of people. They did not waste any time and entered the academy. Why can they cut in line? That's right, we've already waited for several hours. Unfair. A young and vigorous examinee cried out, all of them extremely indignant. A guard from the academy snorted coldly and said, if your father is also the minister of the left, he can naturally cut the queue. As soon as he said that, everyone fell silent. The left prime minister was a powerful and influential figure. The 4 bodyguards of the left minister's residence did not enter the academy. Instead, they spread out, each guarding an entrance to the academy to prevent the naughty 4th miss from sneaking away again. That was a criminal record. After Ling Han and Li Weiwei entered the academy, it was still Li Weiwei who led the way. It was obviously not the first time she had been here. She led Ling Han along the way with ease. After a while, she brought him to a public square. This was also the center of the entire Scarlet Heaven Academy. There was a tall white tower here that had a total of 9 floors. Another 9-story pagoda. Small Tower made a sound of dissatisfaction and said, you actually dare to imitate me? Smash it. Ling Han could not help but break out in a cold sweat and said, although it's also a 9-story pagoda, it's white. It's very different from yours. Anyway, I'm not happy with it. Smash it. Small Tower was obviously also a tsundere. Don't mess around. This is the place used by the Scarlet Heaven Academy for the assessment. If you want me to smash it, let's not even talk about whether I have the ability to do so. Even if I can, how many pieces do you think I'll be torn into? Ling Han said with a smile. The assessment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy was very simple. Once you entered the tower, you would pass if you could climb 3 floors and become a student of the academy. And the higher you climbed, the better your results would be. The top 10 would receive the academy's focus training, especially the top 3, who would naturally receive more rewards. Guess who will get first place this time? Needless to say, it must be Luo Ba. Not only is he one of the 3 great young king tiers of the imperial capital, but his talent is also outstanding. I hope he can get first place this time. You already said there are 3 great masters. Did you forget Jiyuner and Linyu? That's right, I like Jiyuner even more. Just because she's one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital, I'll support her. I like Linyu even more, because Brother Lin is loyal and willing to risk his life for his friends. Everyone discussed animatedly. Though they all had different methods, they all thought that Luo Ba, Linyu, and Jiyuner were the most likely to break through. At least the top 3 places would definitely be theirs, and the only suspense was who would get first place. You guys are too narrow-minded. Are there no geniuses outside the imperial capital? Someone said, unconvinced. Ha 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 ha. This caused a lot of people to roar with laughter. You're really naive. Do you know what kind of place the imperial capital is? Putting aside other things, just heavenly body tier elites, where else can you find them other than the imperial capital? Similarly, nurturing descendants, do you think heavenly body tier elites will lose to sun moon tier or mountain river tier? The difference of one minor tier in martial art is like the difference between heaven and earth. The amount of resources possessed by the clans of the imperial capital is beyond your imagination. Though talent is important, there are many treasures in the world that can improve one's physique and battle prowess. In the end, background is still the most important. Everyone nodded, expressing their agreement. Talent could make up for background to a certain extent, but the problem was that people with background also had talent. How could it be useless even if you put in 10,000 times the effort? Did they not work hard? In a corner of the plaza, a gray-robed old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and said softly, "Everyone thinks that Luo, Lin, and Ji can obtain first place in this examination. Haofei, do you have the confidence to defeat these three?" Great-grandfather, please rest assured. I have immersed myself in cultivation for more than 10 years, enduring loneliness and hardship, all for the sake of shocking the world with a single brilliant feat today. Beside the old man was a young man. He looked to be at most 20 years old, and his cultivation level was in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Haha, great-grandfather will wait for you to shine. The gray-robed old man laughed loudly while stroking his beard. Logically speaking, parents were not allowed to enter the academy, but some people had special privileges, such as the left minister. If he wanted to enter the academy, who would dare to stop him? However, the higher one's position was, the more they would pay attention to this aspect, and would not easily give others a handle to use against them by their political enemies. The young man clenched his fists and said, "Just you wait, today is a day that belongs only to me, Chang Haofei. Everyone else is only fit to look up at me from beneath my feet." In another corner, a young man with bare arms was focused on wiping a long saber. His eyes were extremely focused, but when he occasionally raised his head and swept a glance over, it made the legs of the people nearby go soft. One had to know that they were all in the Shattering Void tier, and a single look could intimidate them. How powerful was this? The first place is definitely mine, Ma Xing. Chapter 894. Let's begin, an important figure in the academy said. Behind him was the silhouette of a sun and moon, indicating that he was a great elite of the sun-moon tier. Though he was still in the low extreme, this kind of elite was enough for others to worship. After advancing into the immortal level, each minor level was a peak that would cause one to exclaim in admiration. There were pitifully few people who could conquer them one by one. The low extreme of the sun-moon tier could be considered to be standing on the 5th high peak. Moreover, this was a super high peak. Climbing the previous 4 high peaks could be considered easy, but if one wanted to cross this one, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Everyone held their breaths, not even daring to breathe loudly. Though there were many people here who had great backgrounds, respect for elites was the most basic quality. Only profligate young masters would act arrogantly by relying on their clan's background. The White Star Tower can accommodate 10,000 people at the same time. Line up one by one and enter. When it's full, there will naturally be a tool spirit to stop you, this important figure said. Make the best use of your time, and strive to complete everyone's assessment today. Yes, everyone couldn't help but nod. Under the influence of an elite's aura, their emotions couldn't help but be affected. Everyone lined up, and entered that 9-storied white tower one after another. This was obviously a precious tool that possessed an independent space. Otherwise, it would definitely be impossible for 10,000 people to take the assessment at the same time. However, the speed of this assessment was really fast. Before all 10,000 people had entered, there were people coming out one after another, even catching up to the speed at which they entered. Every time someone passed the assessment of a floor, this treasured tower would make that floor glow accordingly, and the results would be recorded by the tool spirit. No one could cheat. If one could really deceive this god tool, it was actually even more difficult than passing through the 9-story tower. Those who were determined to strive for a good result all stayed at the back without prior agreement, wanting to be the last one to appear. Blockhead, Luoba is over there, quickly greet him, Li Weiwei urged. Is it really okay for you to be like this? Ling Han shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. This unruly young lady really harbored a grudge against him, and tirelessly wanted him to suffer a defeat. He naturally wouldn't go over, but the Luo brothers had also discovered him. Luo Lai immediately revealed an angry expression. He whispered a few words in the ear of a young man beside him, and the two of them walked over at the same time. The other person was naturally Luo Ba. This person lived up to his name. His figure was tall and sturdy like an overlord, and his aura was even more astonishing. There were circles of divine light flickering around him, as if he was the son of a god. Greetings, fourth miss. The Luo brothers simultaneously bowed towards Li Weiwei. Li Weiwei nodded her head in a reserved manner. She was the daughter of the left minister, and the number of descendants of noble families that could stand on equal footing with her in the imperial capital could be counted on one hand. Luoba then walked towards Ling Han, and calmly asked, Is this brother Ling from a small world? I am Ling Han, Ling Han said calmly. Thank you for your guidance, my younger brother, Luoba said in an awe-inspiring tone, his eyes flickering with fury. Although the Luo clan was not the most powerful clan in the imperial capital, they were not a clan that could be humiliated by a lowly commoner from a small world. Ling Han chuckled and said, It's nothing, don't mention it. Fuck. The Luo brothers were unable to restrain their anger. They were not thanking him at all. Luoba was obviously being sarcastic, but you actually took it seriously. Luoba could not help but snort, and said, No one can humiliate a member of my Luo clan. At first, he had wanted to suppress Ling Han verbally, but he did not think that Ling Han would not act according to common sense at all, causing his punches to be powerless, and instead making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Thus, he directly revealed a ferocious expression. Oh, do you want to fight? Ling Han asked smilingly. In the shattering void tier, he really did not have anyone he was afraid of. Even if it was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, if she suppressed her cultivation level back to the shattering void tier, he would suppress her until she called him brother. Fight, fight. Li Weiwei, meanwhile, was eager to see the world in chaos, and immediately brandished her delicate fists at the side. Luoba sneered and said, You are really cunning. This is the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Who dares to be impudent here? However, even if you enter the academy, I will still challenge you. And if you do not enter the academy, you are dead for sure. Ling Han rubbed his chin, smiled and said, Is it really good for you to threaten me like this? Aren't you afraid that you will not be a match for me, and instead be beaten to the point of begging for mercy? Haha. Luoba laughed coldly. What a joke. He was a well-known figure among the younger generation of the Luo clan, and had great hopes placed on him. How could he be defeated by a lowly commoner from a small world? If it were not for the fact that he wanted to charge for the extreme battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, with the resources of the Luo clan, he could have long since advanced into the immortal level. However, for a brighter future, he would not charge for the immortal level before he was 100 years old, unless he reached 20 stars of battle prowess in advance. And this was also a very common understanding. Before the age of 100, they would charge for the extreme battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. In any case, they were still young, and when they reached 20 stars of Shattering Void tier and broke through again, they could become a 1-star genius, possessing super battle prowess that surpassed a sub-minor level. You just wait, he said word by word. Don't tell me you have a stutter? Ling Han asked, pretending to be worried. How pitiful. The younger brother is an idiot, and the older brother stutters. Sigh. The Luo brothers were unable to restrain their anger, and had an irrepressible urge to rush up and make a move. Fortunately, they managed to control themselves. If they rashly made a move in the academy, and on such an important day, it would be useless even if they had the face of the Luo clan. They would definitely be expelled from the academy, and would never be able to enter again. Let's go for the assessment. Luoba pulled his younger brother, lest the latter's impulsiveness brought him great trouble. Strength was the way of the king. He wanted to climb up to the 5th level of the tower and let everyone know that he, Luoba, was the true king tier of the younger generation. After a while, what, the 4th level of the tower has lit up? If he can advance another step and reach the 5th level, he will have a chance to become a 1-star genius. There's such a saying. Of course. What do you think this assessment is for? It's a kind of test for one's future potential. Reaching the 5th level means one can become a 1-star genius, the 6th level means 2 stars, the 7th level means 3 stars, the 8th level means 4 stars, and the 9th level means 5 stars. Of course, this is only a kind of potential and not certain. You still have to work hard on your own. Therefore, those who did not pass the assessment in previous years can also participate again, as long as they do not exceed the age limit of 100 years. Because if you work hard, you can change yourself, and you can even encounter some fated opportunities. So that's how it is. The newcomers all nodded and looked at the 9-level White Tower at the same time. Though the 3rd level had occasionally lit up before, it was the first time that the 4th level had lit up. Who is so fierce? Who else? Didn't you guys see Luoba go in just now? So it's him. No wonder he could pass through the 4th level, but I wonder if he can make the 5th level also light up. It's a little difficult but not impossible. Just as everyone was talking, the 5th level of the tower lit up. Instantly the crowd was stirred. Oh! Chapter 895. Ming didn't mind being targeted by the restrictions and unleashed his full battle prowess, displaying the divine might of a cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. In this mystery realm, this was definitely invincible power. Pung! Ling Han was sent flying with a single strike. He felt as if his body was boiling, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. Even though he currently had the power of 9 stars, which was only a tiny bit away from the limit of 10 stars, this tiny bit was like a natural chasm. 9 stars was the power of the Mountain River tier, while 10 stars was the power of the Sun-Moon tier. No matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't make up for the gap in power between the Mountain River tier and the Sun-Moon tier. He was completely no match for Ming. This time he didn't have the lion seal to use. Moreover, even if he still had the lion seal, he wouldn't dare to use it. The restrictions here targeted the power of the Sun-Moon tier, and he didn't want to be targeted by them. So what if you had the power of the Sun-Moon tier? As long as you were in the low extreme, you would only be able to make him spit blood at most. If you wanted to pose a true threat to him, your power would have to be at the medium extreme. Ling Han climbed to his feet as if nothing had happened. He patted the dust off his body and said with a smile, "You're indeed stronger than before, but it's far from enough to wound me, shit." Ming's eyes almost popped out of their sockets in shock. His full power attack had actually been blocked just like that. That was an attack of the Sun-Moon tier, and it should be able to kill all Mountain River tier cultivators. So why was it still unable to harm Ling Han? Freak. Absolute freak. Ah! Ming screamed in agony. He had unleashed an attack of the Sun-Moon tier, and it was immediately targeted by the restrictions here. Pew pew pew. Blood spurted out from all over his body, and he instantly became a bloodied man. However, this pain caused him to come back to his senses. He glared at Ling Han with resentment and fury in his eyes, and killing intent radiated from his body. He was going to kill this prodigy to pave the way for his descendants. Die! He was bathed in blood, and he launched an attack at Ling Han. His blood essence burned, and he resisted the restrictions, giving him enough power to suppress Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. Apart from himself, no one knew just how powerful his physique had become. A power at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier wanted to kill him? It wasn't enough. Ling Han unleashed his sword, and the divine demon sword radiated with boundless light as he battled with Ming. Pung 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 pung. Every move that Ming made could send Ling Han flying. This was a crushing advantage in terms of cultivation level, but Ling Han would only spit out a few mouthfuls of blood at most. Ming was in an even worse state. His internal organs, godly bones and meridians were continuously injured by the restrictions. When it came to the 20th move, he shot out a punch, but his whole arm exploded, turning into a rain of blood and bone fragments that filled the sky. The power of the Sun-Moon tier was too strong, and this rain of blood possessed frightening destructive power. There were still a few members of the Gao faction standing nearby, and when they were swept by this rain of blood, they were instantly turned into bloody sieves. Only one person was lucky enough to survive, while the others were all killed in an instant. Yet Shi Ming had already entered a demonic barrier. At present he only had one thought, and that was to kill Ling Han. Thus he did not care about the injuries on his body, and simply continued to attack Ling Han madly. Another arm of his exploded, and he became an armless man. He still did not stop attacking. His legs moved and he kicked out at Ling Han. Papa. Not long after, Shi Ming's legs also exploded into a rain of blood, but he blew out a breath and his body bounced up, and he once again charged at Ling Han, looking like he was determined to fight to the death. Even Ling Han could not help but feel some pity. Should this kind of person be pitiful or detestable? There was no need for him to move. The restriction had already blown Shi Ming's body into pieces, but his eyes were still fixed on Ling Han, and he was about to unleash his final attack. But in the end he did not manage to unleash this attack, because his head had also exploded into pieces. Sun Moon tier cultivators could already be considered elites, yet they had died without a complete corpse. The remaining members of the Gao faction were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Trembling, they turned around and fled. This place was far too dangerous, and he wanted to directly run back to the entrance and wait for Venerable Trinity to open the mystery realm. He really did not want to stay here for even a moment longer. Ling Han sheathed his sword, shook his head, and walked toward Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun. If he trampled on profligate young masters, he would still feel some pleasure. For example, when he stepped on Gao Huang's face one day, he would definitely be in a very good mood. However, Shi Ming made him feel a little rueful, and his heart became a little heavy. This kind of person does not deserve sympathy, but there is no need to hate him either. Ling Han collected his random thoughts, smiled at Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun and said, "Let's go." Hu Feiyun bit into a fruit, and mumbled, "Ling Han, you're so greasy." Just then, Ling Han had slaughtered his way in and out of the chaotic army, and this had caused her blood to boil with excitement. She worshipped Ling Han to the extreme. Of course, Ling Han laughed loudly, and his mood involuntarily improved. The three of them walked for a while, and Ling Han suddenly felt a sense of danger. He suddenly stabbed his sword toward the ground. Pooh! Sword light flashed and shot into the ground. Instantly, a series of cracks appeared on the ground, and they were as dense as spider webs. Fuck your whole family. You almost pierced through Grandpa Ginseng's chrysanthemum. A white shadow shot out from the ground. Fuck your grandfather's treasured ginseng leg. Shua. This white shadow shot toward Ling Han. That lowly ginseng. He truly came and went like a shadow. He wanted to ambush Ling Han, yet he hadn't expected Ling Han's divine sense to be so powerful. Thus, his sneak attack failed, and Ling Han had instead attacked first. In fact, he had almost been stabbed by Ling Han. Ling Han unleashed his fast technique and stabbed toward the old ginseng. "You're 10,000 years too early to kill Grandpa Ginseng," the old ginseng shouted. His attacks were as quick as lightning, and his regulations transformed into sabers, spears, arrows, and spears that shot toward Ling Han. "Didn't you say I was 800 years too early last time?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Hey, Grandpa Ginseng's strength has increased." The old ginseng darted into the sky and burrowed into the ground at an astonishing speed. Ling Han humphed and said, "If you don't obediently come into my bowl, don't blame me for being impolite. You dare to threaten Grandpa Ginseng? I'll kick you to death." The old ginseng flew into a rage, and his attacks became even more intense. Ling Han didn't hold back any longer. Boom! Terrifying flames surged from his body, and divine patterns intertwined. "Fuck! Grandpa Ginseng hates fire the most," the old ginseng wailed. He hurriedly retreated a few dozen meters and finally stopped attacking. Instead, he stood still, an expression of fear appearing on his face as he looked at these divine flames. He was only fast. The might of ice and divine flames were both able to suppress him. "Despicable ginseng, why have you come again?" Ling Han asked. The old ginseng sat down on a rock and crossed his legs. He assumed an extremely perverted posture, and then said, Grandpa Ginseng wants to give you an opportunity. Who? Was he trying to act like a pervert with a straight face? Ling Han chuckled and said, "Oh? What kind of opportunity can you give me? Could it be that you're planning to offer your body? In that case, hurry up and come into my bowl." Tui tui tui. Grandpa Ginseng isn't gay. Don't even think about my ass. The old ginseng immediately jumped up. Ling Han shook his head. This despicable ginseng had grown up in this mystery realm. So just how had he developed such a perverted personality? Even perverts were born with it. Bring Grandpa Ginseng out of the mystery realm, and Grandpa Ginseng will give you some divine liquid, the old ginseng stated. Chapter 896. As Ma Xing walked past, everyone made way for him. Only a few people could withstand his oppressive aura. Even the bigwigs of the academy were nodding their heads. This young man had a majestic gait and the bearing of a king. In the god realm, the so-called king realm was not a martial artist who cultivated qi, but an ambitious and ruthless person who possessed outstanding qi. Otherwise, almost anyone could become a king realm, making the word king realm seem too worthless. However, this Ma Xing was completely worthy of the title king. Subduing the enemy without a fight was a feat that was hard to come by even in 1,000 years. I didn't expect our academy to receive such a student. Ever since Haifeng left the northern institution, we no longer have such a king-tier student, and there has been a gap of over 1,000 years. On the other hand, the eastern, southern, and western institutions have each received a king-tier student within a few hundred years, leaving us far behind. Even if this brat can't pass the White Star Tower's test, I will still take him in as my personal disciple. Haha, how could a king-class student not be able to pass the first 3 levels? Old Ju, you're up to no good. You want to snatch this king-class student. Damn, am I that kind of person? Clearly. When the conversation between these big shots was overheard by the people around them, everyone was in an uproar. King-level students, this was too astonishing. Even with the vastness of the territory of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, this kind of genius would probably only appear once every 100 years. He was incredibly rare and could be compared to a 3-star genius. Ma Xing entered the 9-level pagoda. Very quickly, the 3rd level of the pagoda lit up. There were many people who could pass through the first 2 levels, so the pagoda was almost always lit up. However, the 3rd level was different. It only flickered occasionally. However, after a short while, the 4th floor of the pagoda also lit up. Can it reach the 5 pagoda level? Everyone was curious. The aura of a king tier was not within the scope of the White Star Tower's assessment, so it was impossible for it to gain bonus points. Thus, whether one was a king tier or not would not be of any help in passing through the White Star Tower. If Ma Xing could rely on his own strength to pass through the 5th level, then with the addition of the ruler's aura, he would be able to reach the battle prowess of a 2-star genius. In the future, there would even be room for improvement, and he could reach the level of a 3-star or 4-star genius. Do you know that the left and right ministers, the 7 great generals, and the rest of the 9 lords all have king's aura and are 4-star geniuses? What? Everyone was shocked by this explosive news. They held their heads and exclaimed, "Really? Then wouldn't they be comparable to 5-star geniuses? Legendary super existences?" Of course. Do you know how many tens of thousands of years those people have been cultivating for? Even before your ancestors were born, they had already started cultivating. It is said that the youngest minister Zhua is already more than 8 million years old this year. 8 million years? Are you sure you're not wrong? Not 80,000, 800,000 years? Of course. Back then, the left and right ministers and the 7 great generals were all overlords of their own regions. It was only when Her Majesty the Empress appeared out of nowhere and swept across the world in an invincible manner that all of you were able to submit to her. Hiss, then how many stars do you think Her Majesty the Empress is? I don't know, no one has ever seen Her Majesty fight because there is no need. That's right. Her Imperial Majesty is the #1 beauty in the world. Who would dare to attack her when they see her? Shua, don't speak carelessly, or your head will fall off at any moment. You dare to disrespect Her Majesty? Are you tired of living? Aren't I praising Her Majesty? Just then the fifth level of the White Star Tower lit up. Instantly the crowd was in an uproar. 5 levels meant that he had the potential of a 1-star genius, and added with the genuine might of a king, Ma Xing would basically be a 2-star genius in the future. Ha 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 ha. The big shots of the Northern Institution all laughed happily, feeling that they had finally found a treasure this time. This was an absolutely beautiful piece of jade, and if it was carved, there was even a possibility of becoming a 3-star or 4-star genius in the future. Meanwhile, Luo Ba's expression was gloomy. Even if Ma Xing failed immediately, then the latter would definitely receive more attention in the academy than he did. This made him feel as if he had been slapped in the face. Haofei, you've met your match. In another corner, an old man said. Chang Haofei stared at the 9-level tower and said, Great-grandfather, I have the confidence to pass the 6th level. If you can become a 2-star genius, then you will not be weaker than him. The old man's spirits rose. Are you confident? Absolutely. Chang Haofei clenched his fists. He had immersed himself in cultivation for more than 10 years. All for this day to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat and shock everyone. On the other side, Li Weiwei's face was also filled with shock. Then she gave Ling Han a disdainful look and said, Blockhead, do you still dare to be confident now? Why wouldn't I dare? Ling Han said smilingly. He's a 1-star genius and he also has ruler's aura. He's at least a 2-star genius. Li Weiwei was like a fool. Yet Ling Han put his hands behind his back and said, I've said it before, I'm invincible. It's the same no matter who comes. Wow, how could this guy be so cocky? He was obviously just a country bumpkin from a small world, so why was his self-confidence exploding? Li Weiwei was a little driven mad, but looking at Ling Han's soaring self-confidence, she could not help but be slightly dazed. It had to be said that when a man displayed this kind of invincible aura, it was still extremely attractive to women. Pa, I'm not tempted at all. He's just a fool. Li Weiwei hurriedly clicked her tongue and threw the sliver of panic that had just arisen to the back of her mind. Just at this moment, exclamations of surprise rang out again. The 6th level has also lit up. Heavens! He's a 2-star genius in the first place, and with the addition of ruler's aura, Ma Xing is comparable to a 3-star genius. He's definitely the most outstanding student in the last 100 years. No. Though 2-star geniuses are not rare, with the addition of ruler's aura and the fact that it's limited to the Northern Institution, it's hard to come by even in 1,000 years. Everyone was shocked. They had witnessed the birth of a king. Luo Ba's fists were clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. The other's strength and talent gave rise to endless killing intent in him. If he managed to kill the other, he would still be first. Chang Haofei also felt as if he had received a heavy blow. He was confident that he could pass through the 6th level of the White Star Tower, but that would only be on par with the other. But with the addition of ruler's aura, he had lost by too much. Fortunately, Ma Xing did not further frustrate him, and very quickly walked out of the tower. He had failed in the 2nd stage of the 7th level. This result once again caused an uproar. The big shots of the Northern Institution were almost certain that Ma Xing would be the champion of this assessment, and fought to throw out an olive branch to him, wanting to take him in as a personal disciple. Yet Ma Xing did not accept any of them, and appeared extremely proud and aloof. However, this made the big shots even more fond of him. Which of the future elites would not be arrogant and unruly, and not have the slightest temper? How could he have the nerve to call himself an elite? It's about time I should also go in, Ling Han said. Chapter 897. After Ma Xing came out, there were very few people who had yet to participate in the assessment. Those who had not passed were directly sent out of the academy, and those who had passed stood on the other side of the plaza. There were no more than 300 of them in total. Compared to the number of people who had come to register, this number was pitifully small. There were still about 1,000 people who had yet to participate in the assessment, and they looked like scattered stars as they stood on the huge plaza. Li Weiwei's identity was special, so she could run back after participating in the assessment. When she heard that Ling Han was going to take the assessment, she could not help but become excited and said, "Go quickly, go quickly. I can't wait to humiliate you." "You won't have the chance," Ling Han said with a smile, appearing very confident. "This?" Li Weiwei snorted. This guy had just ascended from a small world, and definitely had never come into contact with the White Star Tower before. He had absolutely no idea what the assessment in the tower was like, so where did his confidence come from? Big Sister Yun. Her eyes were sharp, and she discovered a girl who had just arrived at the plaza. She immediately ran over. This girl was dressed in a snow-white long dress, and apart from a hairpin, she did not have a single other ornament on her. This added a natural beauty to her. She was otherworldly and elegant, as if she were a fairy who had not eaten the food of the mortal world. Wearing any ornaments would be superfluous, and would only destroy her elegant temperament. Ji Yun-er, one of the three great beauties of the imperial capital, and also one of the three great young elites. Those who admired her could line up 3 times around the huge imperial capital. Although her background was not as powerful as Li Weiwei's, her pursuers were definitely not few. Ji Yun-er nodded and said, "Weiwei, you passed the assessment." "Yes." Li Weiwei nodded. "Big Sister Yun, why did you come so late? I thought you had changed your mind, and wanted to wait another 5 years to participate in the Eastern Institution's assessment." Ji Yun-er's willowy brows could not help but furrow, but they immediately smoothed out. She said, "I promised to enter the Northern Institution with you. How could I go back on my word? All right, let's not talk for now, I'm going to participate in the assessment." "Okay." Li Weiwei suddenly raised her hand, and said loudly, "Come on, Big Sister Yun, you must win against that cocky blockhead." Of course Ji Yun-er would not know who Blockhead was. She was graceful and free, and walked towards the White Star Tower. She was like a white cloud untainted by a speck of dust, graceful and moving, causing the gazes of countless people to burn with passion. Ma Xing's eyes lit up as well, revealing an interested expression. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, exuding a demonic aura. In the corner, Cheng Haofei was also walking toward the White Star Tower. It was almost time. If he still did not make a move, then it would not be showing off, but he would miss the assessment this time. This was the last batch of people, and at the same time it was also the batch with the highest quality. The 3rd level of the tower lit up, and even the 4th level lit up from time to time, causing the number of people who passed the test to increase by 100. However, the 5th level of the pagoda had yet to light up. Ling Han walked into the pagoda, and the people around him immediately disappeared. He could no longer hear any noise. He had entered an independent space. A stone room suddenly appeared in front of him. There was only a simple stone table and a jade tablet on the stone table. The 1st level, the first test comprehension. A voice rang out. It was so cold that not a trace of emotion could be heard. It was the tool spirit of the White Star Tower. A god tool was a god tool. Aside from small tower, Ling Han had never seen a tool spirit that could speak. "TSK, the lowest level of god tools, not even fit to carry my shoes," Small Tower said very proudly. Ling Han ignored it and asked, "How do I test?" "There is a cultivation technique recorded on that jade tablet. If you can decipher it in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, you will pass, and the shorter the time, the better the result," the tool spirit said coldly. In this god tool, it could split into tens of thousands of different forms, and it was very easy for it to communicate with tens of thousands of people at the same time. Ling Han could not help but be curious and asked, "Are there any records that can be broken? And are there any rewards for breaking them?" "There are records that can be broken, but there are no rewards. They will only be carved here," the tool spirit said. "There are 10 names carved on the wall in front of you. Those are the 10 people who have used the shortest amount of time, and there are only 10 of them. If there are people who surpass them, they will be replaced." Ling Han shook his head. Then it was fine if he did not break this record. "You can begin," the tool spirit said calmly. The tool spirit asked calmly. If it had been an immortal level elite, they would probably be so annoyed that they would want to beat him up after being bombarded with so many questions. However, the tool spirit was completely unperturbed, and did not show the slightest bit of emotion. Only now did Ling Han come to the side of the stone table, and sit on the ground. Then he picked up the jade tablet and inserted his divine sense into it. Instantly, simple characters jumped out and churned in his mind. This kind of cultivation technique inheritance directly entered the mind and could not be expressed in words or characters. Only by truly understanding it could he give a general idea. Note, it was a general idea and not the cultivation technique itself. The cultivation technique was extremely strict and could not tolerate the slightest mistake. Ling Han closed his eyes slightly and put down the jade tablet. He said, "This is a claw technique, but it is incomplete. There are only 2.5 moves, and there is no matching route of origin power. In terms of moves, it should be like this." He gestured and displayed 2.5 moves of the claw technique. Because it did not involve the use of origin power, it was naturally not difficult. The tool spirit paused for a moment, and then said, "Although this martial arts technique is very low-end, your comprehension is very high. You can be ranked 13th, but you cannot leave your name." Originally, Ling Han had no interest in breaking the record, but when he heard that his speed could only be ranked 13th, he could not help but reveal his fighting spirit. He could use this place to compete with the ancients. The Scarlet Heaven Academy had been established for more than 1,000,000 years, and many elites and geniuses had emerged from it. Many of them were now the mainstays of the imperial court. "You can proceed to the second stage," the tool spirit said. The wall in front suddenly disappeared, and a passageway appeared. Ling Han walked over and saw that there was another stone room at the end of the passageway. It was also very simple, with only a stone table and a jade tablet on the table. "Do I have to retake the test? You have a maximum of 3 chances to shatter this jade tablet with the power of your spirit." The tool spirit's voice sounded again. This time it was a test of the strength and toughness of one's spirit. If one's spirit was not strong enough, it would be equivalent to punching not being heavy enough. And if one's spirit was not tough enough, it would be equivalent to one's fist being made of tofu. No matter how strong one's strength was, it would only shatter one's body and bones. From the shattering void tier onward, cultivators would begin to cultivate their spirit. This was preparation for advancing into the immortal level, and for people like Li Weiwei, they had been nurturing their spirit with various treasures since they were young, so their spirit was naturally extremely strong and tough. This was also the reason why Li Weiwei could not match up to Ling Han. The difference in their starting conditions was really too big. Ling Han might be able to pass the first 3 levels, but to achieve a good result was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. How strong the resources of the various great forces were was mainly reflected in this stage. For example, the reason why Li Weiwei failed at the 5th level was not because her spirit was not strong enough, nor was her talent not good enough, but because she had too little actual combat experience. Ling Han smiled faintly. Would his spirit lose to these young generation of the chaotic star's majestic empire? Chapter 898. Ling Han looked at the jade plaque, and with a thought, a burst of spiritual power surged out, striking at the jade plaque. This was the power of the spirit. When the spirit was strengthened to a certain extent, a single thought could trigger the rules of heaven and earth, and even a massive planet could be shattered. Of course, this was something only Genesis tier elites could do, and Ling Han was still far from this step. The jade plaque immediately shattered. Ling Han smiled faintly. He was still far from destroying a planet with a thought, but how hard would it be to shatter a jade plaque? Moreover, he only struck casually, and didn't use sword heart, or else the power of the spirit would be even more terrifying. This was because he drank the reincarnation tea, and even if it was only a sip, the strength of his spirit now would definitely not be weaker than any shattering void tier elite in the world. "I still haven't said what distance you can attack from," the tool spirit suddenly said. Ling Han gave an and said, "Too close, then put another one." "No, you passed," the tool spirit said. "According to the rules, you can blast out the power of the spirit from a distance of 3 feet. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Why did he feel that this tool spirit had a bit of Small Tower's aura? Actually knowing dry humor. How can it be compared to me?" Small Tower became Tsundra again. It hated tower-shaped treasures the most. "You can go to the 3rd stage," the tool spirit said. The wall disappeared again, and another passageway appeared. Ling Han walked along the passageway to the end, and saw that there was still a stone chamber in front, but it was at least 100 times larger than the previous two. Rather than calling it a stone chamber, it was more appropriate to call it a martial arts arena. Block 10 moves from him, and you can pass, the tool spirit said, and starlight flashed, condensing into a human figure. This was a human figure completely condensed from spots of light, and one could vaguely tell that it was the figure of a man, with a slender figure, but it was completely impossible to tell what he looked like. Young man, make your move, the Starlight Man said, his voice clear with a domineering aura that could make others submit. Ling Han couldn't help but be surprised and said, why is this so similar to a real person? It wasn't the appearance but that reaction, that aura. This was originally created by an expert using a spiritual imprint left behind by him. The artifact spirit said, throughout history, only the person with the highest combat strength who enters this place can leave a spiritual imprint to test the later generations. Ling Han became even more curious and asked, then who is this? I am Su Ran, the Starlight Silhouette said. Su Ran entered the academy 300,000 years ago, reputed to be history's #1 genius. He left 300 years later, roaming the ends of the world alone. There has been no news of him since then. The artifact spirit said. In the past million years no one has surpassed him. Ling Han was shocked. He's a monster, the artifact spirit evaluated. Within the same realm only people can approach him, but they can't even stand shoulder to shoulder with him, let alone surpass him. The test you experienced was only at the level of the Shattering Void tier, and the record for the Mountain River tier was also held by him. This precious tool could even activate the Mountain River tier test. Ling Han's eyes blazed with fighting intent as he pointed at Su Ran's astral body. What if I can defeat him? Then you automatically pass the third stage in the remaining 8 levels of the pagoda, the artifact spirit said. The third stage of each level is to withstand 10 moves from him, but the higher the level, the stronger his power, and the more exquisite his moves. Ling Han was full of heroic spirit, and finally had a strong interest as he said, Senior Su, please grant me a move. Be careful. Su Ran roared and took the initiative to move, punching out at Ling Han's chest. There was obviously no fancy technique in this move, and it was simple and plain, but when the punch arrived it was as if the whole heaven and earth were collapsing, caving in towards Ling Han, turning complexity into simplicity. This was the heart of the fist illumination. Ling Han nodded. The Great Tao was the simplest, and Su Ran's grasp of fist techniques had already surpassed the technique itself. Any casual punch was in accordance with the true meaning of the Great Tao, and possessed extreme might. However, the strongest aspect of a cultivator was still power. Ling Han flipped his palm over, and the earth-overturning seal spread out, a flash of golden light. Pung! With a clash of blows, Su Ran was forced back 30 steps, while Ling Han stood firm. Ling Han couldn't help but frown and said, Your power is clearly not limited to this. Why don't you go all out? Because this is only the first level, the artifact spirit answered. In the test of the 9-level tower, each level was stronger than the last. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Unseal my power. I want to battle the strongest Shattering Void tier. The artifact spirit considered for a while, and said, As you wish. Hong! Su Ran's body of starlight instantly exploded with terrifying power, turning into substance and surging out like waves. The waves swept past Ling Han's body, causing him to involuntarily have goosebumps. This power was too strong. Ling Han, however, had no fear, and only extreme excitement as he said, This is the power of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Ha ha ha, no wonder no one can surpass you. You've truly cultivated the power of the Shattering Void tier to the extreme. In the Shattering Void tier, the limit of battle prowess was definitely not 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, but power. However, not many people could reach battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, let alone power. Come! Ling Han laughed loudly, and welcomed the attack fearlessly. Pung! With a single strike, Ling Han was sent flying, but his physique was too freakish, and this punch didn't even cause a fart of damage. It could be said that to pass the third stage's test by blocking attacks, not to mention 10 moves, even 100,000 moves would be fine. Without reaching the power of immortal level, how could it possibly damage godly metal? Ling Han gave a long howl and rolled back, directly drawing his bow and knocking an arrow. The annihilating dragon star arrow was unleashed and shot towards his opponent. Su Ran didn't have a physique as strong as his, daring to take it head-on with his body. He immediately clenched his fist and faced the arrow. The arrow was unsurprisingly slapped away by him, but starlight also exploded on Su Ran's hand, as if he was injured. That was the annihilating dragon star arrow. After all, a powerful secret technique that was truly inherited from an elite of the immortal realm. Added with the fact that Ling Han had unified the vast lands, he naturally didn't lack resources, and forged a new level 10 treasured bow, as well as a number of arrows forged from level 10 rare metal. What kind of power did Ling Han have now? 16 stars of Shattering Void Tier? Taking his arrow head-on, which Shattering Void Tier cultivator could remain unscathed. Unless their physique also reached his height, the tool spirit couldn't help but be shocked. Ling Han's physique and battle prowess both made its eyes light up. One had to know that this human hadn't reached the ultimate strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han didn't show any mercy. Another 3 consecutive attacks were shot out, and then he charged out with his sword. His right hand used 10,000 techniques returned to 1, while his left hand used the earth overturning seal, blasting towards Su Ran. Pung, the two fought fiercely. Endless power surged like waves. Ling Han used his full battle prowess. His opponent's power was stronger than his, so he naturally wouldn't take it head-on. Instead, he unleashed his own battle prowess to the extreme, especially the annihilating dragon star arrow. This could combine the thunderclap ninth heaven and the eye of truth, and the battle prowess it erupted with was the most terrifying. But what disappointed him was that Su Ran didn't have the slightest bit of weakness on his body. That was because Su Ran wasn't a real living being, but rather formed by the tool spirit using the spiritual brand that Su Ran had left behind. So he naturally didn't have the weakness of a living being. However, not having a weakness could also be said to be full of weaknesses. Ling Han shot a barrage of arrows at random. Each arrow was terrifying, and once Su Ran managed to close the distance between them, he would abandon his bow and sword. With a slash of 10,000 techniques returned to 1, he would explode with an extreme slash that was capable of forcing an elite like Su Ran to retreat. The scene was extremely tense. Chapter 899. Although Wuxia was also a king tier of the younger generation, he had to admit that he was the weakest of the 7. This was also one of the reasons why he had been targeted by the mysterious being. The weaker one was, the easier it would be to possess them, and the chances of success would be higher. Possession was an act that defied the heavens and overturned the earth. Even such a powerful being had to be careful, so they could only choose a weakling like Wuxia in order to maximize their chances of success. Now that Wuxia was being attacked by the 6 king tiers, he would most likely be killed in a single strike. Buzz! As the attacks approached, Wuxia raised his left hand and pressed down lightly. A formless energy appeared and froze the 6 king tiers' attacks in place. He cracked a smile and said, "Don't be impatient. I'll kill all of you once I've completely adapted to this body." This smile was incomparably sinister and evil. Ling Han and the others were astonished. How was this possible? There were restrictions here that targeted power at the Sun-Moon tier and above. Yet, Wuxia had managed to freeze their attacks in place with a single move. This power had definitely surpassed the Mountain River tier. Why weren't there any backlash from the restrictions? This is not power but rules. However, there was a black aura swirling around his face at this moment, so he naturally wasn't the same person as before. Rather, he was the mysterious being that had been possessed. He kindly explained, "I stood at the peak of the Eternal River tier in the past, and I was only a step away from advancing into the Genesis tier. My grasp of regulations isn't something that you weaklings can imagine." He lightly twisted his body. The bones all over his body crackled. His figure underwent a massive transformation, and it was as if he was currently changing the appearance of his body to suit his habits. Break! Ling Han and the others all displayed their might, and all of them broke free. Though the height that Wuxia had once stood at was frightening, he was only left with a wisp of his soul, after all. He was relying on the body of the mountain river tier to display his might, so it would be unreasonable if he still possessed the battle prowess of the eternal river tier. Ling Han and the others were king tiers of the younger generation. Even if there were other young king tiers in the vast immortal realm, they would probably only be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. They had all cultivated to the peak stage of the pinnacle level, so it would be extraordinarily difficult for them to surpass them. However, Shunjur and the others didn't dare to use their power of 10 stars at this moment. Otherwise, they would first have to endure the backlash of the restriction. If that happened, they wouldn't be increasing their battle prowess. Instead, they would be seeking death. The 6 of them unleashed their most powerful attacks, and they madly bombarded Wuxia. Wuxia remained calm and composed, and he only used a single hand to deal with the attacks. In fact, the regulations that he used were also incredibly simple. They were merely a few divine patterns, yet they displayed unexpected effects. They easily blocked the attacks of the 6 king tiers. Meanwhile, he was still modifying his own body. Bone spikes protruded from his back, and a single horn actually grew from his forehead. This horn shone with a faint silver luster. If Wuxia still had his own consciousness, perhaps he would feel gratified. This was because even though he had been one of the 7 kings before, he had undoubtedly been the weakest link. Now, however, he was able to block the combined attacks of 6 king tiers by himself. Moreover, he had done so with incredible ease. This was definitely an unimaginable achievement. If news of this spread, he would definitely become the #1 prodigy in the world. Unfortunately, he was no longer Wuxia. Comfortable, it's really comfortable. Wuxia stretched his neck. Right now, his body was at least twice as tall and his physique was sturdy. His skin appeared to be extremely tanned, and there were patches of it. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that these were actually divine patterns. It was as if they were naturally formed, and there were no signs that they were man-made. He stretched lazily, and a smile appeared on his face. He stared at the 6 king tiers and said, "Stinky bugs, let me think about how I should kill you. Should I steam you or braise you? Fuck you." Ling Han retreated into the distance, and he unleashed the annihilating dragon star arrow at Wuxia. Pa! Wuxia stretched out his right hand, and 2 fingers clamped together. The arrow of origin power was instantly caught between his fingers. This was far too frightening. The annihilating dragon star arrow was extremely fast, yet it had actually been caught between 2 fingers. This arrow is quite interesting. If it weren't for the fact that my grasp of regulations of heaven and earth is far superior to yours, I might have really been pierced by it, he said with a grin. It worked! Shunjur exclaimed excitedly. His fingers are injured. Sure enough, there was blood flowing from between Wuxia's fingers. Damn it! Wuxia's expression changed, and he said, "This body is still too weak. Although his grasp of regulations is far superior to ours, his physical body hasn't become stronger because of this." "His power hasn't changed either," Shurangua immediately said. "It's not like we don't have a chance to defeat him," He Tao said. The 6 king tiers nodded in unison. They were all king tiers of the current generation, and their willpower was as tough as steel. Although the current situation was dire, they didn't panic. Instead, they calmly analyzed the situation. Wuxia chuckled coldly and said, "So what? Under the suppression of my regulations of heaven and earth, what can you do?" He stretched out his hand. Boom! Numerous divine patterns lit up on his body, transforming into divine chains that shot toward the 6 king tiers. Ling Han and the others hurriedly dodged. Wuxia's power wasn't much weaker than theirs, and added with the fact that he had far surpassed the regulations of heaven and earth, his battle prowess was already far beyond what they could contend against. Ha ha ha! Wuxia laughed loudly. It seemed like he still had a sliver of his original will. Otherwise, he would only be facing a few ants at the mountain river tier. Even if he could suppress them with a flip of his hand, what need would he have to be so smug? Ling Han unleashed his annihilating dragon star arrow, firing origin power arrows one after another. He did his best to maintain his distance from his opponents. This was an attack that could threaten Wuxia. Even Wuxia didn't dare to be careless. His battle prowess was indeed powerful, but his cultivation level was only at the mountain river tier, after all. This was a massive weakness, and he had to deal with Ling Han's attack first. Otherwise, if he were struck by an arrow, his physical body would be in great trouble. In this way he managed to buy space for everyone to move, and also gave these young king tiers time to unleash their powerful attacks. Green bamboo kill! Shenjue shouted. Her glabella split open, and a small green bamboo actually appeared. However, it rapidly expanded the moment it appeared, and soon transformed into a towering bamboo. However, it didn't have a specific shape, so it wasn't affected by this limited space. Shua! The green bamboo trembled and countless green leaves fell from it, transforming into numerous bamboo swords that swept toward Wuxia. Purple flames! Shurongwa roared, and flames danced around his body. He clapped his hands and a fire lion appeared. Its body was covered in purple divine flames, and it charged toward Wuxia. Torrential black water! He roared. One eye was tightly closed and the other was wide open. A black netherworld river surged out. The 6 king tiers all unleashed their ultimate techniques. At this moment none of them dared to hold back. Otherwise it was possible that they would all die here. Boom! Divine light soared into the sky, sweeping toward Wuxia. Chapter 900. Although Cheng Haofei was somewhat disappointed, he still appeared to be brimming with confidence. He had passed through the first 2 tests of the 7th level, but he was unable to receive 10 moves from Su Ran. This meant that he still had a lot of room for improvement. After all, his talent was there for all to see. As long as he fought more or cultivated some secret technique, his battle prowess would increase by leaps and bounds. He still didn't know that there were 2 other people in the pagoda. They wore incomparably confident smiles as they faced the crowd. They wanted to receive the tsunami-like cheers, the envious gazes of the men, and the adoring gazes of the women. But he was disappointed. Almost everyone was looking up at the White Star Tower, as if they had not noticed the appearance of a super genius like him. Fuck, what's going on? Cheng Haofei's face couldn't help but twitch. This scene was something he had never expected. He couldn't help but stagger and almost stagger. He forced himself to walk back and pretended to be indifferent, but he pricked up his ears to listen carefully. It turned out that there were 2 other people in the White Star Tower, and they had both passed through the first 6 levels. What? Not only did Ma Xing appear, there were actually 2 other people who could stand side by side with him? If that was the case, he might not even be able to maintain his 2nd place. He might even slip out of the top 3 and fall into 4th place. Shit, what the hell? If he had known earlier, he would have waited for another 5 years. He did not believe that there would be so many geniuses appearing in the next 5 years. But now, all he could do was wait and hope that the 2 people in the pagoda were not as talented as him. Even if they couldn't get 1st place, they could at least get 2nd place. However, although everyone was concerned about the results of the remaining 2 people, the higher-ups of the Northern Institution still summoned Cheng Haofei. They naturally had to win over such a genius and give him some benefits. Otherwise, if he directly gave up his admission qualifications and entered the Eastern Institution after 5 years, they would all be killed by the branch headmaster. After a while, the 7th floor of the tower glowed. At this moment, everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. What does it mean to pass the 7 pagodas? 3-star genius, he wasn't weaker than Ma Xing. He really wasn't weak. It should be known that Ma Xing only had the potential to become a 3-star genius by relying on his king's aura. But now, his potential had soared to 3 stars. Moreover, martial artists could also cultivate king's chi after they had acquired it. It wasn't something that only certain people were born with. Who is it? Who is it? In just a short while, a woman in white appeared. Her black hair was like a waterfall, and she was elegant and otherworldly like a fairy. Sister Yun. Li Weiwei hurriedly ran over and asked, "Congratulations, Sister Yun. You have passed the 7th level of the pagoda. In the future, you will be a 3-star genius when you step into the God realm." The others all nodded. Not long after the 7-story tower lit up, Ji Yun-er appeared. Obviously, she had passed through the 7th level, but was defeated on the 8th level, so she had to retreat. That was a 7-story tower. Even for a great nation like the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, only one would appear every few thousand years. However, Ji Yun-er's pretty face changed and she said, "I did not pass through the 7th level. I lost in the 3rd round." "What?" Li Weiwei exclaimed. "What?" The others all cried out in surprise. It was actually not. Ji Yun-er? How is that possible? Li Weiwei suddenly hugged her head, stamped her feet, and said, "I don't believe it, I don't believe it. It's actually that blockhead. I really want to stomp him to death." It wasn't that she had not thought that the person who had passed through the 7th level of the pagoda was Ling Han, but this thought only flashed past in a flash. Who asked him to be competing with Ji Yun-er? But now Ji Yun-er had personally admitted that she was not the person who had passed through the 7th level of the pagoda, so there was only one person left. Ling Han, a martial artist from a lower world, an ant that would not be taken seriously by anyone in the immortal realm. Li Weiwei was finally convinced. How could an emperor who could break history and open the skies to come to the immortal realm be simple? "Weiwei, do you know this person?" Ji Yun-er observed her expression and immediately realized something. Li Weiwei nodded and said, "That is a martial artist from a small world. He has only come to the immortal realm a dozen or so days ago." Ji Yun-er. A martial artist from a small world? How could this be possible? The cultivation environment of a small world could be compared to that of the immortal realm, the abundance of resources could be compared to that of the immortal realm, and the strength of the elites could be compared to that of the immortal realm. Everything was incomparably backward, and could practically be regarded as a barren land. But it was precisely the person who had walked out from such a barren land that had accomplished a magnificent feat, and passed through the 7th level of the pagoda. This kind of aptitude could be ranked in the top 10 in the entire Scarlet Heaven Academy. The big shots of the Northern Institution, on the other hand, were incomparably excited. This time they had all profited greatly. Not only had the 3 great geniuses all come, but Ji Yun-er had also displayed the potential of a 2-star genius. There were also 3 other dark horses. The worst one had also displayed the potential of a 2-star genius. Of the other 2, one had the ruler's chi, while the other had the potential to become a 3-star genius. The Northern Institution thrives. However, this was not the climax. In merely a short while, the 8th level of the pagoda lit up. Heavens, am I wrong? Did the moonlight suddenly become stronger? Or is it really the 8th level that is shining? It's impossible. We are all wrong. The 8th level has indeed been lit up. 4-star genius. This time, even the big shots of the Northern Institution could no longer sit still. They all came to the bottom of the White Star Tower, impatiently wanting to see this super genius. 4-star genius. What kind of concept was this? The left and right ministers and the 7 generals were only 4-star geniuses, but what kind of existence were these 9? They were the mainstays of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, and practically stood at the peak of this planet. Everyone was shocked, and all of them were even more expectant to see if the person inside could pass through the 9th level and become a 5-star genius that only existed in legends. This freak, Li Weiwei mumbled. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed that that arrogant guy could actually become a 4-star genius. Thinking of that block of wood's arrogant and confident look, she had the urge to smash Ling Han's face in a frenzy. In the tower, the door leading to the 9th level had already opened, but Ling Han stopped in his tracks and thought, should I go up to the 9th level again? Forget it, I should be able to firmly seize the first place now. There's no need to display all of my potential for others to know. Now that I'm a 4-star genius, the Academy will definitely focus on nurturing me. Moreover, although a 4-star genius is very outstanding, it's not like such a genius has never appeared in the history of the Academy. But being a 5-star genius might not be a good thing. A 5-star genius might even alarm that empress, and she might even dig up information from him to find out the secret of how he could be so powerful. How could someone from a mere small world be so powerful? To be honest, if it was not for the sake of securing the first place, Ling Han actually wanted to stop after passing through the 7th level. However, a 3-star genius might not be able to suppress Ma Xing, but a 4-star genius would definitely surpass him. With that thought, he resolutely turned around, not even going up to the 9th level. Chapter 901. When Ling Han walked out of the White Star Tower, he felt that all eyes were focused on him. He couldn't help but think that it was a bit too much to pass the 8th level of the tower. If he'd known earlier, he would have stopped after passing the 7th level. "Little guy, what's your name?" An old man practically pounced over, looking at Ling Han with a fiery gaze as if Ling Han wasn't a man, but a peerless beauty as beautiful as a fairy. Ling Han suppressed the urge to throw a punch, because this old man's face was almost touching his body, but it couldn't be helped. In his excitement, the old man didn't conceal his cultivation level at all. There was an image of a sun and moon behind him, which meant that he was an elite in the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. If Ling Han threw this punch, it was guaranteed that he would lose his life in the next second. He took a step back without batting an eyelid, and said, "I am Ling Han." Although his 2 lifetimes added up to more than 200 years old, in front of a sun-moon tier, his little bit of age was really not enough. Even multiplied by 100 years, he might not even be a fraction of the other party's age. "Ling Han, quickly kneel down and acknowledge me as your master. This old man will take you as a disciple," the old man said hurriedly. "Get lost." With an angry shout, another old man pounced over, directly knocking the first old man into the air, and said angrily, This old man's disciple." "Bullshit." The first old man immediately leaped back and attacked the second old man fiercely. "Hee." The third old man came out, smiling at Ling Han, and said, "Kid, this old man is Zhang Deman, an elder in rotation of the Northern Institution. Quickly come acknowledge me as your master. With this old man backing you up, you can hit whoever you want in the future." Were these words that a teacher should say? "Old man Zhang, you dare to steal this old man's disciple?" The fourth old man appeared, glaring at Zhang Deman. "That's right, old man Zhang, you're too despicable, stealing a disciple while we're sparring." The first 2 old men stopped fighting and walked back one after another. "Kid, who do you worship as your younger brother?" The 4 elders walked towards Ling Han at the same time. This caused everyone to feel envious. To be able to be the disciple of 4 sun-moon tier elites, what kind of glory was this? This was life. What more could they ask for? The Chaotic Star's majestic empire still had heavenly body tier elites, but how many of them were there? The sun-moon tier was the backbone of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. The heavenly body tier was more of a deterrent. Ordinarily, they would not move easily. Of course, the sun-moon tier was also divided into 4 levels. These 4 old men were all at the low extreme, and were at the bottom of the sun-moon tier. "Don't waste time. Go and handle the admission procedures for everyone." At that moment, a middle-aged man flew over and stood at the top of the 9-story tower. Although his voice wasn't loud, it rumbled through the hearts of the people below. "Yes, Lord Vice Headmaster." The 4 old men hurriedly bowed. Only then did everyone realize that this young man was actually stronger than the 4 elders. This was a little inconceivable, but the higher one's cultivation, the longer one's lifespan would be, and the slower one would age. Thus, perhaps this middle-aged man was much older than Zhang Deman and the others in terms of age. With these words from the vice headmaster, Zhang Deman and the others naturally didn't dare to argue anymore. They hurriedly made arrangements and brought those who passed the test to the student quarters of the Northern Institution, while Ling Han, Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei, Ji Yun and the others stayed behind. The top 10 were all rewarded. The reward for the top 7 was very simple. Each person had a true origin stone, and the reward for the top 3 was much more substantial. Ling Han was naturally first place without any suspense, but the second and third places had to be discussed. Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei and Ji Yun all completed 6 towers, and also passed the first 2 rounds on the 7th floor. So who was second, third and fourth? After discussion among the higher-ups, it was decided that Ma Xing was second place, while Cheng Haofei and Ji Yun were tied for third place. Although this would require the Northern Institution to fork out some more resources. Firstly, the Northern Institution was rich in the first place, and secondly, they were only in the Shattering Void tier after all, so the resources they consumed were limited. The top 3 enjoyed great privileges. For example, they had a chance to bathe in the Black Jade Pool every month. That wasn't for you to bathe in. The Black Jade Pool was a spiritual pool formed naturally by heaven and earth, and had excellent nourishing effects on the physique and spirit of martial artists. After being taken over by the Scarlet Heaven Academy, large amounts of precious treasures were added to the pool, further improving its effects. However, this pool was only effective for Shattering Void tier and Mountain River tier cultivators, and had no effect beyond that. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been placed in the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Even if it wasn't taken by the imperial family, weren't there still the 9 kings, the left and right ministers, and the 7 generals? Secondly, they could also receive 2 true origin stones as a reward every month. This was an item unique to the immortal realm, because the spiritual chi of heaven and earth here was really too rich, turning into substance. Its appearance was like jade, and martial artists could extract the energy within it. Whether for cultivation or origin power recovery, it was an excellent supplementary item. Of course, if it was used to recover origin power, it would be too extravagant because this thing was incomparably precious, and itself was a precious treasure. Besides, true origin stones could also be used as money to purchase precious items, and could also be exchanged for gold and silver, but only a fool would do that. Thirdly, there was an extra replenishing spirit pill every month. Replenishing spirit pill could strengthen the spirit, and was effective for both Shattering Void tier and Immortal tier cultivators. However, Immortals were too powerful, and the effect of replenishing spirit pill was pitifully small. Usually they would take the Star Yang pill, which had a much stronger effect, but was also much more precious. As long as one was a disciple of the Academy, one could receive a replenishing spirit pill every month, and the third place could receive an extra one, the second 2, and the first 3. True origin stones and replenishing spirit pills were immediately distributed, but the qualifications to enter the Black Jade Pool had to wait until next month, because the time for the 4 major institutions to enter the Black Jade Pool was already divided, and this month's time for the Northern Institution had already passed. After Ling Han and the others received their rewards, they then went to the place where they would live for the next few years, a dozen years, or even decades. Unless they broke through to the Immortal tier, they would always live here. Along the way, Zhang Deman was in charge of telling them some rules, such as don't wander around the territories of the other 3 institutions if you had nothing to do, unless you were extremely powerful, or else you had to be prepared to be beaten black and blue. The Academy encouraged students to spar with each other, but in principle, it was forbidden for high-level students to fight with low-level students, unless the low-level students took the initiative to provoke. Finally, Zhang Deman said something very strange. Also, there's a white cat here. You must not provoke it. You must not hurt even a strand of its hair. Otherwise, no one will be able to save you. Why? Everyone was completely confused. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.